So it appears we do not get along.
Say what?
So back up off or get involved.
Say what?
And if you scared, get a dog. Gray sky, good gracious, and oh no. Hot death, fall close in slow-mo. My skin is amber like a ripened bud. My adversaries trying to spill my capillaries full of Viking blood. I seldom like what they be hyping up, so people want to fight and tell me lighten up. What? I'm just trying to lighten them. Beyond you, I just didn't think it's slamming. My t-shirt isn't pink, it's salmon.
Old school, new school, no school. These bass lines ain't raised no fool. H-say wall at a homeroom. Heads up, show up in a throne room. Hoping for a breadcrumb, throw up in the showroom. Wait, show him how the road do. March to his own with the clone proof. Songbirds perched on my finger at the window. Admittedly, the rest of my life is a fucking shit show.
So it appears we do not get along.
Say what?
So back up off or get involved.
Say what?
And if you scared, get a dog. So it appears we do not get along.
Say what?
So back up off or get involved.
Say what?
And if you scared, get a dog. Yo, get a wolf, get a husky that looks like a wolf. Get an Iditarod, you know the dogs that run the Iditarod. Get a dog from the Iditarod, which is supposed to be a tough dog.
A new report out found that lice is actually changing and mutating, becoming immune to standard treatments.
I'm from a village in the hill where everybody got a mitigated call, but no refrigerators filled, and every father there got pocket stock with Zilch, and every mother there forgot to take a pill. I'm rocking for my ilk who started crying for they barber spilling milk. Listen, we don't want no drama, but the bomb already built. Just when everyone you know about the ill, I swoop in like a crow from out the sky and snatch a pop from off the sill.
Is it fighting words or minor birds? Piracy or idling? A lion heart or life alert? I don't support a media that fetishize the wealthy cause it's weird. I'm here to help contextualize the belfry to a room of terrible cadets who dress like Mr. Belding. I'll turn them into messengers rebelling. It's compelling. The cavalcade approach on the heels of obscene evil as easel as meteoric as Beanie as Steve Zissou. I only move aside for the sun.
I only move aside for the sun.
I don't really move aside that much. Nah, I mean.
Nah, I mean. And I'm not a big fan of the check-in. Check it. Just ahead, I throw a left for every gambler laying a bet and every child that wet the bed. I check my text who's trying to swing an apple. Wait, that's just my ex who's trying to lay an egg. The sky is changing colors. I'll be up to here in debt when death become a such a porno on your Tumblr. I keep time by counting summers and teach you how to do the walk without a fee. My name is Homeboy Sam. My style is a lock without a key.
Odd world bogmen, slog through toxins, groggy, squash all goblins, promptly, brutal mood, relocating stickers on his Rubik's Cube, wildlife showing signs of ruin, doom for you and you and you and you. Shoes made of wah-wah pedals that turn a walk to the wah-wah to gods and devils. I'm at the table breaking bread with both the wicked and the righteous. It's hard to tell the difference through a history of violence. I only move aside for the sun.
I only move aside for the sun.
I don't really move aside that much. Nah, I mean.
Nah, I mean. And I'm not a big fan of the check-in. Life's got a secret handshake that includes paying the landscape and equal distribution of the syrup between the top and bottom pancakes. Survey the damage from the rampage and piece it together with glow-in-the-dark band-aids. Behind the barricades is a bum who need a shower but will the power to paraphrase. Hey, I made a wish that I could shift more shapes. Withholding your support is just poor taste.
Cheat code fluent, chief flow mutant. The kids sit still till a tree grow through them. East Coast, eat slow, throwing pizza crusted pigeons. After dinner, hit up Visa with two Dobermans like Higgins. I'm looking for a mystery bigger than me to remedy, regardless of its place in the greater collective memory. I pissed at every terrifying truck stop in the country. I'll piss up on your pickup truck for absolutely nothing. I only move aside for the sun.
I only move aside for the sun.
I don't really move aside that much. Nah, I mean.
Nah, I mean. And I'm not a big fan of the check-in. check it.
All grown stuff, long road, no fluff. Piece of work, eat the turnbuckle like a roast duck. Post-punk, played a back, raider, rudder rations. Blacksmith, forge cold train at a klaxon. Zap, the riddle, rig alone about the residue. With social life akin a black Phillip at the petting zoo. Run ragged till the blood magic pretzel you. Ragtag plasma donors clashing over devil's food. Cake. These are the bricks that make the embers blue. I can't wake up without a lake of fire to step into. I can't wake up without a battle scene to emulate. I'm in the kitchen repositioning the trebuchets. Top rope swan dive, aim for the ballyhoo. Bonsai, certain death hangs from the parachute. My bows and arrows like two lovers underneath the Paris moon. They've been together since the bounty hunt this afternoon at KIS Society. Eyes on his rivalries. Look at all these wonderful prizes inside his diaries. I write about the lyrium and disappearing devils. Then frame it with a margin of the most feared symbols. And a shitty drawing of me playing Guns N' Roses pinball. People peeking in my window like they might just wear my skin home. I walk like a D-Day sim. You walk like a D-vein shrimp. Simp. I know a couple things about a couple things. I know a couple things about a couple things. I know a couple things about a couple things. I know a couple things about a couple things.
Imbued with the fortitude and shards of glass and broken 40s on the old 40 dose. This ain't your 40 acres in a mule, dude. This is 20 paces in a duel, dude. Don't do it. If Vaney's yesterday becomes tomorrow, cause I never learned. My closet fills with shit I borrowed and did not return. And never lifted like a proper curse. You heard the hiss behind the acid smile, the bastard child of Mother Earth. Behind the pimp there lies a princess that is cold as ice. I hope that you're the one, if not then you're the prototype. Blind as allegiance that was sworn to rights. The water's warm in the disorder, but you ain't about that sort of life. Mine's tend to wander like Madonna's on the borderline. The loaves and fishes make for dirty dishes, let's just pour the wine. After a couple gallons, ain't no balance left to toe the line. You need a different type of motorcon. No need reversing, hear the praise of his Azazel soon as the record plays. Encore a day, the DJ take us to the end of days. Until the crowd becomes a second stage. I'm up for burning at the stake and switch Panaka out for pepper spray. That's where they call the coppers 88. Where they beat it up and eat it up and heat it up until it radiate. Fuck the delaying and the weighing like we playing games. Who's down to laying graves?
I know a couple things about a couple things. I know a couple things about a couple things. I know a couple things about a couple things. I know a couple things about a couple things. Oatmeal cookies. Oatmeal cookies. Oatmeal cookies. Oatmeal cookies. Hated myself since before it was cool. Face death like an orphan of gruel. Pardon the drool. 4 eyes, palm croquis. Ominous blueprints and a peace sign middle going on with stupid. Top stooge, rock the pontoon. Lash move, Don Clobber the chronically obtuse. Put down the telephone around a crow and double back. Summoning a storm from the pulpit of Farmer's Almanac cleanly. Separate the chuckers from the bucket hat. Hold still, gold fillings jump into his duffel bag. Shift got a shape of the minions. Started out simian, graduated Ophidian. Fitting in as a fool's errand, unworthy to emulate. I don't care, I never really felt cool anyway. Back in the cave for safekeeping in the company of Lorna Doone and polyphasic sleeping.
10 years since I stood still. Started on my good foot, but running out of goodwill. Still got a sneaker full of pebbles and a Jenny full of demos and a pocket full of anvils. My dog's a riddle with self-inflicted bullet wounds. I mix the beef pollen with the free bowling. Cats already fed up with my lifestyle choices. I ain't even stopped pretending that I don't hear voices yet. I'm stranded on the internet, spilling all my innards in the interviews, turning to a silhouette. Running out of substance, at least authorities running low on my thumbprints. I had to break out from the function for my unlimited Metro card turned to a pumpkin. But we were messing with the G-O-D, triple O-G, triple G, Galati Golovkin.
Oatmeal cookies. Oatmeal cookies. Oatmeal cookies. Oatmeal cookies. I anchor in the bottleneck, double-knotted lobster bit. Sit and spawn, game on, flames to the aquanet. Prickly disposition from a mission statement, riddled with the crippling misdirection of a million shaded middlemen. Pretending to be different than the businesses they meddle in. Until the whistleblowers separate the skin and skeleton. Underneath the hood is all pedestrian, essentially. Thespianism spread it into the documentary, I mean. What are rules, ever-winning etiquette? Allegiances have come unglued, tender feet are cherry-picked. Little lambs sure to go like everywhere that Mary went. Lions get therapy and branded as heretics. Single-tier ace play taps on a theremin. Terribly serenade the death of transparency. Now we ride out cloaked with no cronies, watching alphas grow up in a bronies. Oh,
I want a dime piece that smells as good as McDonald's fried grease. It isn't always criticizing my beats. I want a single to blow like Souls of Mischief and 9-3 so I could get Bobby Sonic a Diet Cola IV. I only want to be a billionaire for 48 hours like Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy, and Billy Pitt. Longer than that and I'll get bored of it. I'll be like water with that sort of shit. Yeah. Backstage is like a bat cave. I rush out of it and act strange. I hit from a broken back without a back brace. When I met my fiance on the back page. Thank you for the accolades. I'll trade them in though for a half a day. Everybody ditch the caravan and love and join the cabaret. And grab your mama rays. Hey.
Oatmeal cookies. Oatmeal cookies. Oatmeal cookies.
My name written in blood, my sword covered in rust, my songs written in mud. I'm in the trench with no one to trust. The things I counted on been ground in the dust. God bless the child if it's sprouted underground with the chud. Except for falling in love. Ain't no better feeling on the earth than getting a smirk. Wipe from off of your mug. Undercoated and been voted the least likely to budge. Taking chances where the answer's always all the above. Good luck calling my bluff. Had to lay the hammer on your hunting, gathering stuff. It was rather abrupt. Set the balance for battalions too wary to lug. Rashes cross the battlefield. This barren shit is barracks or bust. Nobody taught me not to stare at the sun. Only photocopies for the class to share and discuss. Man, your mathematics may be fine for finding the sum. But that ain't nearly what's up.
I'm covered in that grit, covered in that sludge, covered in that muck, covered in that mud.
See, I'm covered in that sweat, covered in that blood, got covered in that stuck, covered in that mud.
Yeah. Time to make the donuts, eat, drink, annihilate the bogus. Wide awake and snarling, the dark wings opening on my darling. I speak in holy code and keep the rodeo alarming. Homie, old eyes, parrot a roach that won't die. Slow night spirit looking for a hide to ghost ride. Over the river, through the woods, I eat the bread, I spoon the mush. Keep it dirty, we prefer misshapen over cookie cut. My office hours are known for 30 seconds, then it's off into the tempest for berries and buried treasures. Trade tall tales with lepers and lost dogs. Swing claws at pinatas in the shape of all y'alls. Hey, the new voice of a defective species. Reflect from the cheap seats, checking his cheat sheets. Eat a raw horse heart, yum yum, 4 stars. At the fork is it forfeit or forward march.
Grit. Covered in that sludge. I'm covered in that muck. I'm covered in that mud.
See, I'm covered in that sweat, covered in that blood. Got covered in that stuck, covered in that mud.
Swap a ace out for a joker.
Rise with the rebels, feisty, feral.
My poker face is not for playing poker.
Never die, never shy from the pedal.
The number on my ticket reads eternity.
Up in the wee hours, barking and building.
See it,
Feel it.
I'm steady as the fingers of a surgeon. Aware the destination is absurd as the excursion. Aware that the extent of the hilarity will vary and the climax and the ending all depending on the version.
SpongeBob PJs, dream in a deep space. Sleep spooning a nuclear briefcase. Spoon sugar till his teeth ache. 3 cheers, 2 for his team, 1 queen in the
covered in
beer.
that grit. Covered in that sludge. I'm covered in that muck. I'm covered in that mud.
I'm covered in that grit, covered in that sludge, covered in that muck, covered in that mud. My search history ain't glamour and glitz, more rent plans. And can a man be a witch? One Stan Smith, 5 toes curled in the sand. Free a bird from a cage, feed a squirrel from his hand. Greet a world with a wry face, don't play fair, I'm all ice made of cola, I'm all snakes for hair, I'm all side scrolling eye contact over speed chess. Blink once, get a king, need 6. Ace boogie, brain getting mushy, no break, still break for a plate full of cookies. How his shoes so clean, he barely housebroken. Mold unclean air in a wild moments, focused. Overgrown topiary uproot, rosemary middle fingers poking out the sunroof. Donuts in the parking lot, yelling duck, duck, goose, funk drums, pull your guts through your jumpsuit. Stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding.
Duck, duck, goose, buck, buck, duck, dope. Pushing and shoving, shuck, shows. Gotta be the shows, early to rise. It's gotta be the snows. Chicken is dry, you can the big skills. Thanks. Print you out a boarding pass, get an autograph from the earth man who don't believe a single thing he didn't see firsthand. Ain't up on the laundry list of accomplishments. See the burner on the side of the Washington Monument. Don't panic, the kid dropped jewels like his true love died on the Titanic. I go from being all leave me alone, timid and mild-mannered, to all muscle and brawn, bigger than gigantic. Sun splash, multiple and what's all in the day for the can't miss. I run fast, even in handcuffs, a little way to the blacksmith. Bitch!
Stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. True indeed, tune into the truancy. Suit 'em up, 2 cents, trooping out the mutant league.
Tissue full of mucus in the mutiny. Dig a tunnel cutter with a Wolverine. Sweet sheesh.
Flowers growing from his feet, grass growing out his ears. Beard made of poison, I'll be growing for 1,000 years.
Shift the planets to alignment, feels so good like being reunited. Madam Stalin while I signing volunteers.
Ready Player One, he get the whole fly neighborhood howling. Jumps to a crowd scene drowsy.
Player 2, not sure what to say or do, except to stay up and to say a prayer when you pay a due.
Stares at his feet when he speaks to the law. Stares at a screen, I'm a freak, I'm a flaw.
God bless my neighbors for the papers I could cheat off. I'm too wide to dream, too tired to beat off.
Stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding.
So laborious, bright, gets a recondite with vocabulary. Adversaries will commit to ignite like magnesium oxide, compound peroxide. I'm hazardous, poisonous, the carbon monoxide. Earning stacks, gold, sterling plaques from burning tracks. You're learning that if you're unconcerned with rap, you're turning back now. Man, I bomb you, please. From up in the trees, I freeze the season with a tighter squeeze and anacondas.
Hey, yo, one heart, plated with curly golden tiles mixed with a little mischief. Behold style, auto back, alley shaman, liquid Tomb Raider with a most fertile assortment of spitting logics for lab rats, got colossus in the spotlight. The A$AP rock be the handle, while your breath control is tough to breathe alone is not enough. I correspond to a kick snare bomb, but share the passion, but a small percentage of the masses in their fashion.
I got a feeling that you got me where you want me. Left between you and the palm of your hand. And you've got cartoons in the morning when I'm sleeping. I just got dreams that I don't understand.
Supply the check, known from Cali, shout Alex. My respect and style, some try to get, but die direct from the side effects. You crave purse, cause I'm well equipped with predicate. You too delicate for the spell of flip kid, you better get saved first. Cool freaks, pretty, no floor feet, all sweet, small peaks. Cause my stocks exchange like Wall Street, still a slick. Kicking the illest hits, who kill us quick when I bill a spit more rounds than Bruce Willis flicks. Ideas and flow, raise eyelids, that's why kids make hybrid rhymes. Applied with stuff this guy did years ago to grasp a taste. Have to place them in the glass case and observe from a NASA space center with a mask on face. Power of the year, make others fear the way this brother is empowered. I am the God's camera taping me.
When pride, covetousness, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth form the frame of your demeanor, I address but a rapidly lessening portion of majors dissolved in the abortion of creation's new laborers. Pilot burner, whittled of traits, divinity composes. The tunnel through banana spike the anti-hero dosage. In a cradle I label the dreaded simulation we compile. Tenets embedded within synthetic inclination. We have never dined on bait, so when corrupt crooks hooked simple Samaritans, I was buried in books. Shook on a Nevada dead, a sun moon merger to guard the difference. The New York MC population dancing uncontrollable expansion. I cyclothymic pound dodger, pusher with a nickel toward a town squatter. Bother me not. My wallow crossed the village drunken, mumbling in the streets about how an angel gets its wings with every blue note I release. An angel gets its wings with every blue note I release. Could this be lies? Cause I'ma spit cobalt till every angel flies. I blew the operation set to clinch Victor. Walkie-talkers turn awkward fixtures to complete the wicked mixture. The fire and ice combination adjourns fresh. I return with the last living specimen caressed. When the earth is vacated and the populace cleared, I'll be the last starfighter sipping a goblet of my tears.
Mom? Are you busy?
Not right now, honey. Can I help you with something?
I hope so. My head has really been itching lately.
Let me have a look. Oh dear.
What is it, Mom?
Just as I suspected. It's lice.
Call me if you need a bum to bring the belching or a situation worsened by someone who thinks they're helping. The drums are eating healthy. Hell, he might deploy to Garrison, who rap like hanging out with rappers hadn't turned to parenting it had. Barrel over everyone you're parroting. He don't need a Mac to lead a rat into the periscreen. Professionally peeking through the blinds. I will read up on your peeves. I will lead up all your fries.
They don't make enough tie-dye my size. People wondering what race am I. Yet they build an Ace and I shrine. Taxing fools like H&R Block. Agent Orange, get your A&R shot. Space to roam like the Italy spot. Bitter critters get at me for diddly squat. Stop. I'd point out if not for being tasted, so your face is at the base of my... Yo.
You on point, Sam?
All the time, Ace.
You on point, Sam?
All the time, Ace.
You on point, Sam?
All the time, Ace.
Well then grab the microphone. I'm late for my own weight.
Will do. Just write down the address where I could bill you. Sandy feeling wholesome, Mrs. Soap scum in the mildew. Councilman for sponsoring bikinis for the swim team. Life would be tragic without Egyptian magic skin cream.
Minister of Schitt's Creek, ballroom blitzing. Under cloud cover, the color of fresh squid ink. $5 milkshake, half raw New York strip steak. Jaguar shark in the fish tank.
Batman in a bird cage, bird brain. Go shorty, it's your birthday. Danger isn't my middle name, it's my first name. These pretzels are making me thirsty.
Yo, my parents still don't understand how their stoner son could turn a silver tongue into a brand. Hack pulp writer, now they're younger in demand. More a pandemic crawling from the guts of the expanse.
You're on point, Ace.
All the time, Sam.
You're on point, Ace.
All the time, Sam.
You're on point, Ace.
You're all the time, Sam.
Well then grab the microphone and lift the Muslim band.
Twists and turns and twists. When I step into the mall, they yell, burn the witch. I serve with wailing spirits and weeping walls. Cave dwellers and whoever looked the least evolved. They free fall through traffic. Short a couple hubcaps. Sword high, wore a white tie to the bloodbath. Don Mattingly mustache. Naked lady mud flaps.
Funk that. Thumbtacks for your dunce cap. It's my world. My ex-girl got me a gun rack. Tried to rub against me with her fun bags. Changed man, know I'm above that. I vowed to search for where they'd hidden the gem. But nowadays I'm more concerned with hitting the gym. Boondoggles of the prodigal son. Big goggles for the cardinal sin.
reason to rebel. I sneak into the club, I ain't leaving without a pelt. For the people feeling needlessly beleaguered at the helm, trying to ease up at the nucleus and bleed into the hills. I'm a old sea dog sipping on fizz. My oak still put skate stickers on a bridge. Ate dinner at the Denny's with a dumbed out coven. In the company of uninvited bloodhounds huffing. Tough crowd, he the true to cut king or crud. Thing 1 and 2 in one thing. None drum up any drama for the huffy. I ain't even lift a glove about the pockets of the puffy. Once, I don't know frozen food, homie. The acid in my stomach eat bones and hooves. I rehome lone wolves, let them socialize a little bit. Learn pack policy, turn you all to pick up sticks. Rebel, rebel, fuck a precious metal. I'm the dopest, getting cozy with a pencil and a level. The mostly grown up Mowgli, keep a scepter in the tendril. Here to walk into the light with the excessively disheveled. Shovels on our shoulders, spinning out of the nothingness. Roaches in our honeycombs, nothing in our money clips. Bass in our media, spirits in our computers. Sad trombones in our futures. Troopers.
I don't ever get too comfy. I don't like to own much stuff. I ain't really wanna unpack. If it goes down, I'ma jump up. If it goes down, I'ma jump up. If it goes down, I'ma jump up.
Solo dolo on a late night, holding thousands in old brown, rocking for talisman, scheming on a power play. Underneath an urban sombrero, peep the good sun, surfs up in the sub-zero. Started each negotiation, taking or leaving it. Type of shit that only come from living and breathing it. King Diggity, crossing the Mojave, do the highway robbery, thievery. Sudden moves will scare away hiccups, or somehow orchestrate drop-offs, pickups. This is what I train for, no get up, it's a gig. Everything is paid for, everything is free. You already know about the girth. This the type of shit that leave a glow around the earth. Now I stayed cause I was lost but now I'm saved. But it was slaves that built the church, so just pretending misty watercolor memories of the way we were. With service lights too dim to find and been defined as trying to find a cure. It's divine to forgive, but it is human to err. But breaking out when dangers looming is even human-er. Jokes are all on the inside, stock of awkward silences for coming in handy. Catch you all on the flip side, off to catch some hate from my immediate family.
I don't ever get too comfy. I don't like to own much stuff. I ain't really wanna unpack. If it goes down, I'ma jump up. If it goes down, I'ma jump up. If it goes down, I'ma jump up.
And Hubert used to be able to make the sound. And he wasn't talking, but he used to go.
Yo, I've been watching the playoffs.
Yeah.
Papa John's commercials. Papa John's is looking pretty good, man. Domino's even looking okay on TV.
It looks better than the game.
They got the Burger King, the Bacon King, yo. Shit got 41 pieces of bacon on it.
Not enough.
It's a going insane thing, you wouldn't understand. I never stay the same, long enough to build my brand. Turned on the radio to listen to a little rap. All they seemed to play was Mary Had a Little Lamb. Got a budget, went on Instagram to post some ads. But something about seeing that sponsor just felt super whack. So now the budget's sitting there collecting dust. If anybody's got ideas, feel free to interrupt. Yo, I'm nervous that I've said too much. Involvement with my promo budget ruins my mistake. Something like that shouldn't matter cause my shit is tough. But unfortunately, most of y'all are fucking dweebs. I think this site reviewed my record off the snippets. It figures that on Twitter, that's the one that captures interest. I swear these sites will give a job to any doofus. No need to say they name, cats is fucking useless.
Get on down in Louisiana where the biscuits and green.
I wanna eat pizza and burgers all day, but I get fat. Pizza and burgers all day, but I wanna eat pizza and burgers all day, but I get fat. Pizza and burgers all day, but I get fat.
Clan leaders sit around canned peaches. Divas who never scanned off brand Cheez-Its. Lost lambs in a sea of pleasant facial features. Hope you also plan to celebrate the rejects. Even though I know to never let a heckler penetrate the defense. I'm aware there's entertainment in a weakness. I also know I'm fortunate to even be allowed the inconvenience. So don't mistake the floundering for doubting of allegiance. He can doubt his own resilience in the hour of screaming beachless. killers who distract him from the bounty on his demons. Even if I'm Shakespeare on paper, in person I'm Beavis. Homie, that'll make a Jesus that fits into what he preaches. A walk how we do. Wait till it's dark and walk out the zoo. Halfway to who the fuck knows by two. Giving you the broke wing crow's eye view.
I wanna eat pizza and burgers all day, but I get fat. Pizza and burgers all day, but I wanna eat pizza and burgers all day, but I get fat. Pizza and burgers all day, but I get fat.
If I knew for a fact tomorrow I would die, I'd eat burgers and fries and pepperoni pies. I still might die tomorrow, but don't know. But wanna be lean, so eating apples like a mofo. Yo, then I'm doing it again. The problem ain't the dying, it's just the not knowing when. With everybody being dense, wouldn't be surprised if being dead it'd be a 10.
Hey, some days I forget to not get stoned before my therapy. Doctor said it wasn't fatal, mostly just embarrassing, man. Talk about trials of the errant. Every second at the pen is like a fire to the pen, and every breath is alive with a dying message. Letter to the editor inscribed in his weapon. I ain't buying what they selling, just might climb into the vellum.
I wanna
tell them
pizza and burgers all day, but I get fat. Pizza and burgers all day, but I wanna eat pizza and burgers all day, but I get fat. Pizza and burgers all day, but I get fat.
Excellence, set it off like Genesis, Exodus. Ladies and gentlemen, focus on the swinging of the pendulum. Good for nothings, hold your tongue like a frenulum. Catch me at the aqueduct, had a couple ponies pay the charges I've been racking up. Homegirl tried to cast me, had to let her know I'm no good for acting except for acting up. You can catch the acupuncture if you act a punk. Pack 'em in and pack 'em up, jump around, rounding up the fakers for the break 'em in. Paper thin, crumble out, chilling on a number cloud. Less than 10, more than 8. Went from touch to honest Dave, not a grade, modern grade. Not a game, topless since I got in shape. Show it off, not ashamed. Absent from communion and immunity. The iocane, lions, tigers, spider veins. By the way, I ain't scared of big brother. I love my little sister. I didn't vote, I already got enough stickers. I still be myself even when folks snicker. Folks don't be they self even when they ate Snickers. Solstice, equinox, off the day the stripper. So slick when it's raining, I don't need a slicker. Screening phone calls, seldom do I pick up. Contravening cornballs and selling corn liquor. Missing Mayan, hit a light the candelabra. Blah 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 blah. Ha ha ha, LOL, BRB, SMH, smiley face, whatever resonate. Hope you have a pleasant day. My favorite color is heather gray. I shaved my stash, I had a rash but it just went away. My name is written in a language you could never say. My height and weight make up the number that you better play. When I ain't writing, I be fighting MMA. When I ain't spitting lightning, I be drinking lemonade. My gotta shield your eyes from all the light I emanate. My early shit was a big influence on Hemingway. This fly, in love and memory of Dwight's pops, patron saint of the fish fry. In NY, pigs post pics of the pigsty. Get a load of this shit, get a load of this guy. Knuckle to your head, bro, like hello McFly. All of y'all look-alikes look alive. Just in the nick of time, I pop my lips to lick off like a nickel 9 and smear erythromycin on a simple mind.
my horse drinks on its own, I ain't gotta do shit. True grip, I'm the crew to tell you my dude's piff. Please hold for the high noon kid. Roll dice, smooth chips, push like screw wigs. Keen eye, loose lips, toss rubes in a cauldron. Add salt, now you got a nice stew going. Protectors of the realm, keep a jester at the helm. The bells are like a heckler, the hell is not conjecture, fella. Cold stone wall shorter, what's the protocol? Slow your roll and don't approach the homie during multi-ball. Don't approach the pokeball or pay to fill the finger tax. Roll his weed for 7 days, I'll let you get the pinky back, maybe. Pod people climb through the fray. On coals when he walk, on time when he late. Step into the time loop, scan the room for side boob and slide out. Back with the slime in the tide pool. Find out, I at a typhoon. It's my house. All I know is night moves, fried food, and dry mouth. Haiku and magpies dying to peck your eyes out. Fly from the Argyles to the barbed wire crown. The golden oldies, holy water to the witches. I never heard of water under bridges. What is it? Wait, I can't pretend to care. I'm busy down in Herald Square, standing on a soapbox yelling out, repent, the end is near. The children and their parents who assure them, yes, that man is weird. Maybe so, maybe though that doesn't mean death isn't here. It got a little dark there for a second. I'm terrible at parties. I'm wonderful at Tetris. I'm number one for anybody down to fudge the metrics. I'm Dumbledore for anybody down to smudge the lenses. I'm Mensa if you down to numb the senses. If none of the above apply, I'm just another dummy in detention. Somewhere in between, I hate you all and hungry for affection. Come jump into the tempest with the lovers and the lepers. Suckers, psyops climb through blind spots, whilst good vibes get the pine box kibosh. Rock bottom, just got neighbor. A bump, sun, ride, dodge frogs from the ether. Wear sweatpants every day or less a problem or a feature. The posse is bottom feeders and possibly hot for teacher. Keep a wolf at the door, bull by the horns, jewels and a sword. Keys to the city plus code to the green room. Toothpick thrown on a pyramid of cheese cubes. None for you. Saying you can have some. Chris, get it. Lice.
Lyson came along and pulled some strings to get the kidney transplant. You've been waiting on the heroes fit the chair up. Kanye and Cudi and Weezy with their eyelids closed and do the hardest yoga poses. Easy less than Rocky and Sandy was controlling from the cockpit. Israel and Palestine squashed it, bumping from the wintertime to autumn during morning, noon, and night till you're old and never get another coastal in your life.
Lyce is single-handedly responsible for spearheading the conservation efforts that would lead the giant panda off the red list. Revolutionaries in support of all-day breakfast. Play the record for your mother, she might let you get that Xbox. Unless you're hard of hearing, unicorn should start appearing. Yetis woke up at the forest, you could score a jar of fairies. Solve world hunger when the base break chains. Automatic good hair day for anyone in range.
Boy, they say they name and the pain go away. Out of left field, something off center. Skin crawlers make it all better.
One track will make the one that got away come back, run back with a rucksack full of rubs so that rug rats never run laps when you one nap. And all of that jazz when you struggling through a class you can't pass, and the teacher's on a concept that you hardly can't grasp, and it's finals in an hour so you feeling so tense. Bump the insects for some insight and it all will make sense.
When I'm on the microphone, teeth start whitening. Geese lay golden eggs, seas part entirely. Governments abruptly guarantee the people's privacy, and every day you find your keys before you cannot find your keys. Two to make it true, who can make you shake the flu? See the folk who owe you paper, pay you by today at noon with interest. Drums that come with a sense of friendship will feed your shitty cat while you vacation in the Hamptons.
Boy, they say they name and the pain go away. Out of left field, something off center. Skin crawlers make it all better.
The Alliance for Gravity Defiance. Think aloud until you figure out what happened to the minds. You should try it while you overdose. You'll overthrow a tyrant when it's over. Brush some dirt from off the shoulder of a giant. Once your mind's blown, after that you'll never drop your iPhone. You'll be able to touch your index fingers with your eyes closed. For relief that's long lasting. License, Miami Vice, erase blind casting.
You will be accepted into social scenes and secret clubs. You will always have hot water when you take your evening tub. You will never know a boat that doesn't know the sea of love. You will find your favorite ever pair of shoes for cheap as fuck. Feed the rats about the city to the water. Each and every chorus foreshadow an extra week of summer. Listeners are winning trips to tropical locations and tickets to the movies and dollars out in Vegas.
Boy, they say they name and the pain go away. Out of left field, something off center. Skin crawlers make it all better.
I'ma slit my wrist, no tourniquet. I'm murderous, my crib got more burners than furnishings. Got a lot of haters, not concerned with it. The earth revolve around earning currency. Copernicus, I leave you scared, stupider than Ernest is. Plucking more chickens than the churches is. Always looking fly, boy, I'm merciless with purchases. Police ain't nothing, you can bet I beat the verdict, bitch. Cause I'm more connected than the alphabet and cursive is. Wallet like Webster, killer like Dexter. Your bitch looking at me, well I guess I'm on the sexer. Ugly stay rougher than the texture. If you players want that funk, I'm that fly shit expert.
Bullets, fly through the air. There it is, no playing. There it is, no playing. Bullets, fly through the air. There it is, no playing. There it is, no playing. Bullets, fly through the air. There it is, no playing. There it is, no playing. Bullets, fly through the air. There it is, no playing. There it is, no playing.
Playboy, I'ma stay grinding till my pocket's straight Halliburton. And I'ma grind dirty, never met a fouler person. The list of shit I'm worse than as long as scripture verses. I'm about to hit this perk and rummage through your mother's purses. You cats is yellow with a stone ground mustard. Ugly mine is stone ground up and reconstructed. Glocks, I'ma bust them. Pussy, I'ma crush it. Plus I stay luxurious, you bitches are disgusting. Getting money fast, that's my modus operandi. I've been ice cold since the night I saw my man die. Bullets knock you on your ass, you swore it was a landslide. Ugly ain't a boss, hell no, that's a damn lie.
Bullets fly through the air. There it is, no playing. There it is, no playing. Bullets fly through the air. There it is, no playing. There it is, no playing. Bullets fly through the air. There it is, no playing. There it is, no playing. Bullets fly through the air. There it is, no playing. There it is, no playing.
Yeah, motherfucker going after all the true players. Fuck these diva ass, old bust ass, slaw ass bitches, you heard me? Motherfucker true gangster shit. Where the motherfucking thugs, playboys, feel me? Real life money getting. Uno trade throw away, motherfucker blast. Talk all that shit, motherfucker ain't got nothing to motherfucking say when this bullets flying at your motherfucking bitch ass head, you feel me? Real other man, serious shit. 21W, you heard me coming out from the other side, bitch.
I need an 8 for the 66. Pick shit just like the 60s, except
them dudes built. Riding 45 in a 50. I smoke them joints, now iron split. Damn, this ball really got me lifted. I rap so time, people say I'm gifted. Hustling on that paradise, that cushion got me paralyzed. Verified, I'm very high. Whip so clean and sterilized. Terrorize your block, you in my way, why ain't you moving? Being super sorta human, roll the quarter in the Cuban. Now we grooving, feeling extra throw. High like wings of buffaloes. Just to let you buzzers know, them double bags got extra dope. Only fuck with snakes and hoes, I swear I'll leave the rest alone. Underground, I'm lesser known, but in the hood they feel my testimony. Y'all ain't smoking on my level, y'all ain't fucking on my level, y'all ain't drinking on my level, y'all ain't nothing on my level. These fools ain't needing a lesson, they probably smoking that resin, they talking all of that shit. I probably pull out my weapon, that sour diesel be relieving my stress, getting me right. I swear it's hard to not just walk outside, ready to fight. Lime green cannabis, color of praying mantises. No stems, no seeds, crystals like they amethyst. Yeah, don't you wish you could be me, bitch? Don't you wish you could be me? Don't you wish you could be me? Don't you wish you could be me? Turn me up some, 665 plus one. I'm entitled to my money like a trust fund. Come up off them dogs, let me touch one. Drops on every corner like the way the city bus runs. You know that I'm an active fool again and lick shots in unison with crews of hooligans until you left with fewer friends. Catch me on the news, being in the view, wearing your jewels, saying I saw it all, but I don't know who the shooter is. I revel in the infamy, can't make the symphony. You can't function with it, then you really not a friend of me. Bullet hit your neck, travel over your extremities. Make me feel sad, knowing murder not your remedy. But that's the way you be on the block. Brave heart, stay sharp before you run out of clock. Cause there's no half stepping, you either in or you're not. And with the way the lips black, you either kin of the cops, bitch. Don't you wish you could be me? Don't you wish you could be me? Don't you wish you could be me? Yeah. Don't you wish you could be me? Don't you wish you could be me? Don't you wish you could be me? So what's the drill, kicko? Ayo, the black talent separate the breeze like a whistle. Shoot flame out the navy window. Call the whip zippo, leave you crippled. We can do it in the park or at the dark at the cribbo. Finesse invested, roll around in suits double-breasted. Whips foreign and domestic, bubble butted shorties big chested. Blessed on the mic majestic. I keep it so filthy that the mic septic. We can throw hands, golden gloves. I got the marvelous mollywop. The way I lick shots, I call the double barrels lollipops. Ugly blow spots just like a Molotov. And I'ma stay rich till the fucking coffin drop. Hey yo, I walk around with mostly large rifles for survival. Cause death walks hand in hand with struggle, Stokely Carmichael. Bitch, get my motherfucking money, bitch. Don't you wish you could be me, bitch? Don't you wish you could be me? Yeah. Don't you wish you could be me? Don't you wish you could be me? Yeah, Mr. Thug Isolation. Don't you wish you could be me? Ho, 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 ho. Motherfucker haters, you hear me? This how we doing it, man. Yeah, motherfucker. This how motherfucker doing it in this bitch. Bitch, I'ma roast and lugubrious. I'ma let the oozing spit. Turn his face into gooey shit. Bitch, I'ma roast and lugubrious. I'ma let the oozing spit. Turn his face into gooey shit. Bitch, I'ma roast and lugubrious. I'ma let the oozing spit. Turn his face into gooey shit. Bitch, I'ma roast and lugubrious. I'ma let the oozing spit. Turn his face into gooey shit. Bitch, I'm lugubrious. My trap game is stupidest. You acting like I'm doing this. I've been success to uterus. I equate your uselessness to bitches that are bootyless. Your YouTube page is viewerless. It's humorous. Flyer than a stewardess. You pussy smell like tuna fish. You wanna kill me, try and prove it, but I bet you can't maneuver it. Grabbing the Ruger and cocking it back. Psycho mentality, killing attack. Sipping on dollars and counting a stack. Hack on my salary, nothing but crack. Yeah, bitch, I ain't really nothing like a hero. I just wanna get my dick sucked and multiply them zeros. Ugly mind stay harder than the old trunk. You can fuck around, swear to God you get your throat cut. Bitch, I'm a roast and lugubrious. I'ma let the Uzi spit, turn his face into gooey shit. Bitch, I'm a roast and lugubrious. I'ma let the Uzi spit, turn his face into gooey shit. Bitch, I'm a roast and lugubrious. I'ma let the Uzi spit, turn his face into gooey shit. Bitch, I'm a roast and lugubrious. I'ma let the Uzi spit, turn his face into gooey shit.
Hey, what's the word, kids? Oh, fuck. Alright. So today, I'm just testing everything out pretty much, making sure it's all finally working properly. I know it's been a long time coming and everything, but I've had a shit ton of issues trying to get OBS to work properly on my PC, my internet, make my microphone work correctly, my camera, all that good shit. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I think I have it all finally just right. But anyways, just don't expect this to be super entertaining. I don't have anything planned. I don't have much to say today either. It's just going to be a test stream, just going to watch some videos and stuff while I keep an eye on the back end of things. You know, make sure it's not fucking crashing, which it very well may crash. So don't be surprised if that happens. Yeah, I guess just please reach out to me with some feedback if you have any. That's always appreciated. And let's start doing this. Let's see if this all works correctly. So to start things off, looks like there's a brand new video by Ordinary Things, which is a great YouTube channel for those who aren't familiar. Highly recommend it. This guy is super funny, super informative, lots of great videos. I watched pretty much everything that he puts out, and today he dropped a video called The Blimp Extinction. I haven't seen it yet myself. I'm sure it's interesting. I don't know anything about blimps, but I'm sure he'll find a way to make it entertaining. So let's give it a watch, shall we?
I hate flying. The whole experience is a paranoid exercise. There's nothing like a full body scan and a light fondling from an armed guard to prepare you to spend the next 11 hours breathing recycled air in a flying Pringles can. Even if you can shell out 5 figures for some additional leg storage and an edible meal, there's no escaping the stomach-flipping turbulence and the irrational fear that a skein of geese might hurl themselves into the engine. If only there was another, roomier, smoother way to fly that was also shaped like a giant inflatable penis.
It's blimp.
Well, once upon a copyright expiration ago, before the Technicolor times, majestic airships graced the skies. The best way to fly, unless you want it to be somewhere in a hurry or there was a moderate breeze. The brave floaters who first filled the air with these gigantic gas bags were forgotten pioneers who dared to dream the impossible. It's tragic then that today, airships are virtually an endangered species. Nearly all of them left to act as buoyant pop-up ads or heavy-handed motivation for Miami drug lords.
Yeah, why don't you see blimps anymore?
This deep in the 21st century, which is why this month I've made it my mission to ride one.
Okay, you think anyone's ever painted one to look like a whale? That'd be quite good, like a little sky whale, a little beluga blimp.
But first, where did blimps come from? Long before the birth of blimps, the first age of lighter-than-air travel had already taken off.
What's the whole story with Led Zeppelin? Why are they called Led Zeppelin? I'm gonna have to look that up.
And plowed itself into the ground. All the best ideas start on paper, and in the case of human flight, this was quite literal. The Montgolfier brothers discovered that a paper balloon suspended over fire would fill up and float. After a few experiments and prototypes, the brothers arrived in Paris and met with King Louis XVI, where the brothers explained how they might lift the man into the sky. Always up for the possibility of some public bloodshed, King Louis suggested that 2 criminals be given the honor to ride.
The newly formed group finished the obligatory concert schedule for the Yardbirds, but then went on to record their first self-titled album under the name Led Zeppelin. The name came from a comment made by Keith Moon of The Who, who once said the band would go down like a lead balloon. Okay, that's stupid. Anyways. Come on, play. Oh, great. Now the video doesn't want to play. There we go. I think.
Earth's first floating machine. Instead, a sheep, duck, and cockerel were sent soaring up 600 meters above Paris, escaping the surly bonds of Earth and the Paris piss smell for all of 2 minutes. The first human to fly, Jean-Francois Pilatre de Rosier, got an unparalleled view of the beginning of human aviation. The grand idea of getting higher than anyone had gotten before spread across the idle rich of France like brie across a farm labourer's scalp. Le Frère Robert built the first balloon that didn't choke you on smoke fumes, with the first hydrogen balloon in 1783. Their unmanned balloon flew for 15 miles before crashing into a French village, where it was attacked by peasants with pitchforks who believed it was the work of the devil. Only a few months later, the brothers flew themselves over 100 kilometers in a ship adorned with rowing oars which pointlessly swung at the airwaves. These early days of aviation moved quickly. Just 2 years later, the first human aviator again tried to make history by crossing the English Channel, only to be immediately blown back into France. Tragically, his half-hot air, half-hydrogen balloon ignited mid-flight, and Jean-Francois fell to his death on this exact spot, which would have been a lot messier if his memorial had already been built. Jean-Francois lost his life for the dream of flight. Over the next 50 years, balloon flight went from a spectacular sight to an urban irritant, with balloons bobbing up above London on a near-daily basis. Besides the antics of daredevils and professional animal droppers, the hot air balloon only really had one practical application: as an instrument of war.
Of course.
The French and Austrian armies first found use for hot air balloons, mostly against each other, but their power wasn't fully utilized until the American Civil War, where they were outfitted with telegraphic equipment so that balloonists could report on enemy positions from the clouds. In a very real sense,
how'd they get the message back to
Balloon
them?
Corps was America's first ever air force. The ability to view the battlefield like they were playing a game of Age of Empires gave the Union a significant tactical advantage in many early skirmishes. They were piloted by a small team of civilian daredevils, including German-born aeronaut John Steiner, who had famously attempted to fly a balloon over Lake Erie in Canada. Time would inevitably forget Steiner and his death-defying stunt, and his most history-making flight must have seemed completely mundane at the time. In the last year of the Balloon Corps' active service, Steiner made a short tether ascent as a demonstration for a visiting foreign dignitary, a German military officer and nobleman named Ferdinand von Zeppelin.
Oh damn, so the Zeppelin is just named after some guy?
Ferdinand von Zeppelin was a man with more self-belief than common sense. During his first balloon trip in 1863, he was already 10 years deep into a decades-long military career. In the Franco-Prussian War, he instigated a daring raid against the French that went deep behind enemy lines, where he bravely allowed his entire unit to be captured or killed. But as the sole uncaptured survivor of the raid, the press made him a hero of the newly united German state.
What a
While
Chad.
his military superiors saw him as a risk-taking head case. For the next few decades, von Zeppelin mostly forgot about his inspiring American balloon journey. But coincidence has an annoying habit of making history. During a routine exercise, von Zeppelin was thrown from his horse and hospitalized, where he came down with a life-threatening fever. His wife was with him when one night he woke up in a delirium, ranting about flying machines and ocean liners in the sky. Top military brass took the opportunity to finally brush him off, suggesting him for an early retirement. While his career crashed, von Zeppelin inherited the title of Count and hundreds of thousands of Deutschmarks from his recently departed father. So the 52-year-old left the military with
I want to be a
fortune
count. I
and
want that
looked
to
to
be
the
my
stars
title.
for a late-in-life career change and a second chance at glory. The Count's delayed arrival to aviation would turn out to be exceptional timing. When the Count threw his spiky helmet into the ring, others had already spent decades trying and failing to control balloons in midair, allowing technology and industry to catch up with the Count's delusional ambitions. Combustion engines had gotten lighter and a lot more efficient, and 2 new methods of creating aluminium at industrial scale were developed independently of each other in the 1890s. By 1900, von Zeppelin had spent a sizable chunk of his family's fortune to build his first working prototype, the LZ-1. The size and sausage-like shape of the craft initially only brought ridicule,
It's a giant
from
pill.
the journalists who witnessed the craft's first and only flight. On the failed launch of its successor, a newspaper wrote that his pathetic obsession had only led him to squander his fortune and destitute his family. Though one journalist was kinder to von Zeppelin than the others. A 32-year-old named Hugo Eckener goofed on Zeppelin's creation, but applauded the man for his high-flying dreams. Days after publishing the piece, Eckener would wake up to the sound of the Count himself knocking on his doorbell repeatedly with a walking stick. And after a brief conversation, Eckener would agree to do part-time publicity work for von Zeppelin's company. Hugo Eckener didn't know it at the time, but he'd just taken his first step to becoming the greatest airship captain that history would ever know. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, some hayseeds in North Carolina had successfully flown and broken the world's first fixed-wing aeromoplane, a rare achievement among a sea of Carnival Act aviators attempting to master heavier-than-air flight. Like that'll catch on. Just one Zeppelin later, the Count and the giant penile shadows he cast over provincial German towns became a symbol of national pride. The LZ-3 was a roaring success, staying in the air for 2 whole hours and taking 11 people up for the ride. Mirroring his military career, though, Count von Zeppelin's death-defying failures often brought him more acclaim than his achievements. When the LZ-4 exploded in mid-flight, the spectacle of its shattered skeleton appeared all over the newspapers. But this inspired a crowdfunding campaign which raised 6 million marks for von Zeppelin's further experiments. No longer blowing his children's inheritance, von Zeppelin now spent the German people's money on Zeppelins, and spent his golden years flying them. He experimented with size and shape, mostly deciding that bigger was better, dwarfing those puny planes that could barely stay in the air for more than a few minutes. The 60-year-old also spent his time training a host of new pilots, including his longtime publicity man, Hugo Eckener, who turned out to be a talented pilot as well as a savvy businessman. Airships could fly thousands of feet higher than airplanes, so the Count could figuratively and literally look down on them. As he got older, though, his vision got narrower, and he was probably going a bit senile. My Zeppelins will rule the world! He became obsessed with leading a fleet of Zeppelins for the military that had rejected him 20 years ago. He dismissed Hugo Eckener and others when they span off from the Zeppelin company to found the first ever passenger airline. Customers rode in style on eye-wateringly expensive domestic flights between German towns on DLAG's small fleet of airships. Passengers on Earth's first airline would fly and only occasionally crash in world-class luxury. Meanwhile, the Count's ego was inflated to bursting point as he convinced the government to invest in a fleet of war-ready Zeppelins. And as usual, the Count's timing was top-notch, because a war was just around the corner. A great one. Are you tired of staring into the hungry abyss of an empty fridge, or of late-night shopping trips for missing ingredients where you have
Gotta
no
admire
idea
the
who
hustle, at
bottled
least.
them first? In that case, look no further than HelloFresh. Fit and wholesome recipes that make it easy to eat well without sacrificing flavor, so you can maintain your goals and feel good about your food choices.
Jesus Christ, fucking everyone has been shilling this HelloFresh shit lately. Like, fucking H3, every fucking stream. Like, every single person that I watch online is shilling this fucking HelloFresh shit. I mean, it doesn't look bad, but good lord, the fucking ad campaign they're on is insane.
From every week. That's more choices than any meal kit on the market. This week I'm having sea bass. HelloFresh is the first carbon-neutral meal kit company, and nearly all packaging is recyclable. With its huge variety of recipes, it even allows me to please the picky and most important vegetarian in my life. Go to HelloFresh.com and use my special code OrdinaryThings16 to get up to 16 meals completely free and free surprise gifts, one of which might include chocolate, so what are you waiting for? HelloFresh.com. By the beginning of World War I, Germany had 11 airships ready to fly, including 3 that it had yanked from Hugo Eckener's commercial airline. Against all odds and his own ailing health, Count von Zeppelin saw his wildest dreams come true. Over the 4 years of the war, over 93
God, that's a badass name. Count von Zeppelin. That's the sickest name in history.
Londoners when they arrived above the city in the second year of the war. And they were even more successfully used by the German Navy to scout out enemy positions. But after a year of inaccurate and infrequent European bombing campaigns, a British airman named Willie Robinson became the first man to shoot a Zeppelin down. Thousands of Londoners watched from their homes as searchlights illuminated Willie's single plane during its hour-long climb to meet the SL-11 in mid-air. Willie then fired a series of incendiary bullets of his own design, piercing the Zeppelin's many gas bags and igniting it from within. Londoners watched in disbelief as the giant German sausage barbecued in mid-air and lit up the night sky, while each member of the SL-11's crew were forced to choose between falling or burning to their death. Willie Robinson was awarded the Victoria Cross for his Zeppelin-bursting bravado, and the Flying Corps became national heroes. By the end of the war, airplanes were able to climb to the same heights as Zeppelins, though wing flight was still a lot riskier. The average life expectancy of a World War I pilot was about 3 weeks. Willie Robinson fared a little better, flying for another year before being shot down behind enemy lines and spending the rest of the war as a prisoner. He did eventually make it back to Britain at the end of the war in 1918, where he was eventually finished off by the influenza pandemic a couple months later, which is really the lost generation's experience in a nutshell. Meanwhile, the original human Zeppelin suffered a similar fate as his military fleet, as his own internal gas bags succumbed to a nasty case of pneumonia. Count von Zeppelin died a national hero, and as usual, his timing was impeccable, as nearly all 93 of his inflatables had drowned, burnt, or blown away by the end of the war. When Germany surrendered, the military was forced to dismantle any airship they had left under terms agreed in the Treaty of Versailles. Hugo Eckener campaigned fiercely to keep some for civilian service, but failed to save any from the scrapyard.
Oh, come on now. Oh, it's locking up. Come on. Gonna have to do some more tweaking, it looks like. Play.
The mighty airship had proven in the war that it could stay in the sky for days at a time and travel thousands of miles at a smooth pace. The L-59 performed a continuous 95-hour flight during the war. Commercial airplanes, meanwhile, could only handle a small payload and were a lot less comfy, having the tendency to shake harder than a mistreated washing machine. Airplanes spent the rest of the 1920s getting better, mostly by...
come on. What happens if I switch back to this?
An error. The next generation of passenger
That's much
airships
better.
were built with scale, style,
Okay, so
and
I guess it's
comfort
just
in
that
mind,
one
not to compete directly with
setting.
airplanes, but with ocean liners. This led people to logically predict a future where planes and airships would share the skies. While it didn't quite work out like that, I was determined to manifest this future in 2022, at least for myself. Look, it's a blimp. Although that isn't quite accurate, it's actually a rigid airship, one of only about 5 in the whole world, and we're gonna ride it, so I'm real excited. Goodyear has been making these airships since all the way back in 1925, and it is really the only company that is keeping the dream of inflatable flight alive.
I didn't even know that's what Goodyear does. I just knew it was a brand.
It sports these aluminium and carbon fiber trusses which hold free vectored engines. Now, I don't really know what that means, but what it essentially lets it do is land and float in midair, much like a helicopter, but except, you know, it's much bigger and way cooler. So if you're like me and you have trouble telling what's a blimp and what's an airship, the trick is to look for the propellers. If they're on the side of the big balloon thing, then it is an airship. If it's on the gondola, then it is a blimp. So if you see a big floating sky sausage in the sky and you're not sure, check for the propellers. Haven't had to go through airport control. I mean, I don't have any liquids on me, but I'm
That's
sure
such
I
a
can bring them on if I like.
pedantic
So
distinction.
Far, this is far superior to any airport experience I've ever had. So what's your role specifically?
Crew member.
You're a crew member, okay. How long have you been doing this? 6 years. Ooh.
Welcome aboard.
Are you ready to float? I think I am, although I'm not particularly steady on my feet right now. Nice big windows, lots of space. I don't know much about blimp flight, so the joystick you use it to move them forward and backward. If you wanted to take this full tilt and go as fast as possible, how fast can we go? Can we break the speed limit? 120 miles an hour?
Holy shit.
We're
What?
very odd to be floating and then also be able to like see the ground. We're currently off the ground. But
They
only
can
by
go
about
over
2
100
meters.
miles
So
an hour?
Truly, airship flight is the height of luxury. I mean, I've got more leg space than you could ever get on even the highest of first-class flights. And we're floating right now. Technically not quite in the sky, but blissful floating on the Goodyear. No waiting around, no people jostling with their luggage, and no waiting on the tarmac. It's just one jump, and you're off. Airplanes beat that! By 1920, the Goodyear Tire Company had already made a fortune by putting rubber
Oh,
on
my
the road.
spider's out.
So it only made sense that their next move was to put blimps in America's skies. Goodyear Vice President Paul Litchfield acquired designs and engineers on the cheap from the
distracting
ailing
me.
German Zeppelin Company. That way he could construct Goodyear's first fleet of plump promotional blimps. Mostly used to spread the good name of Goodyear, they earned the love of the American people by showering them with free stuff. Litchfield was so pleased with his success that he spearheaded a collaboration with the German Zeppelin Company to bring rigid airships to the States. And this was great news for Hugo Eckener, who had already convinced the
I'm having such a hard time paying attention to this right now because one of my tarantulas is out crawling around and doing stuff. And it's really cool. I think at some point tonight, before I end the stream, I might take him out and let him crawl around on my arms so you guys can see it.
US to accept some of Germany's war reparations back in Zeppelin form. He personally piloted the airship Los Angeles to America on its 81-hour delivery flight, and it would become the US Navy's longest-serving airship because, well, the other 3 crashed.
Holy fuck, that's a lot of people.
The USS Akron was probably the most cursed airship to ever sail the skies. A source of oversized American pride, the Akron was the first ever flying aircraft carrier and the biggest floating thing ever
That's sick.
at the time of its construction anyway. But its helium load and jumbo size meant it was extremely sensitive to the winds, like here when a
I got a
swirling breeze
jumbo
gave it an
load for you.
unexpected cesarean. Just 3
What the
months
fuck?
later, the extra-large airship was at the end of a coast-to-coast journey when it attempted to moor in San Diego. As an untrained ground crew attempted to bring the ship down, the helium inside was heated by the Californian sun, making the gas significantly lighter and the ship extremely sensitive to an upward gust. Most of the mooring crew were able to escape, but 3 unlucky and unwilling aviators were taken on a nightmare voyage from which only 1 survived. This moment was later recreated in the James Cagney film Here Comes the Navy, with a happier ending stapled on.
Can you hang on another minute? Well, it ain't Flatfoot. I might have guessed it. The only guy in the Navy dumb enough to hang on the end of a rope. Going down too fast to suit me. Hope we make it, Kent.
Later
Terrible
on, the
green
Navy's
screen.
Premier airship encountered severe fog and weather off the coast of New Jersey. After suffering extreme turbulence, the Akron crashed into the sea, leaving its 73 crew members to drown or expire from hypothermia. A Navy blimp was sent out to join the search for survivors and also crashed, adding 2 more men to the accident's death toll. The Akron's demise was actually the deadliest airship crash in history. But because the crash and its wreckage were never recorded on film, it's largely been submerged in the tides of history. Its sister ship, the USS Macron, wasn't quite as accident-prone, but it too was lost off the Californian coast in 1935. The precedent of the Akron's crash, though, meant that crew members were provided with life jackets, and nearly everyone on board was saved. Though this was the end of the airship's American naval career. After the war, Hugo Echner was at a loss. He'd inherited a Zeppelin company that didn't have any Zeppelins. Ever persistent, though, he directly lobbied the German president to build more Zeppelins. Another military hero named Paul von Hindenburg. And I can imagine you can guess where this is going. Echner explained his designs for an even bigger Zeppelin. One
I've
that
heard
would
of
make
that
all the
name.
old ones look like floating Frankfurters. Hindenburg granted Echner a few million Deutschmarks, while Hugo made
That's one
deals with
German,
America
he's
and bled the
aggressively
possible parts
German.
of his business dry. In just a few years, Echner would personally fly the greatest airship that would ever fart through the sky. LZ-127 is singular in aviation history. Better known as the Graf Zeppelin, it achieved 9 years of fatality-free service and facilitated the first ever passenger
We
service
stan.
across the Atlantic, beating any airplane service by nearly a decade. On board the Graf Zeppelin, 24 passengers could fly to America in private cabins and would dine on creamed chicken soup and all the German beer they could drink, before retiring to the lounge for a stable game of chess. Although there was no bath, so they arrived in America stinking of a week's worth of sweat and hangovers. Echner wrote at the time that the Graf Zeppelin experiment would lead to either victory and fame or the final downfall and the end of a defective concept. And the next decade would pretty much bring all of those things in that exact order. Still, Echner spent the next decade serving as the captain on all of the Graf Zeppelin's major flights. On the Graf's first arrival in the States, he was greeted by a crowd of 150,000 people, who clogged the road with traffic just to get a glimpse of the enormous ship. New York treated the Aviator to its largest ever ticker tape parade, and even planned to let passengers disembark at the top of the Empire State Building. At home, the Graf Zeppelin
That would
was
be fun.
celebrated across the political spectrum, although it was particularly enjoyed by nationalists who saw it as a source of German pride when there wasn't a whole lot to be proud about. In 1929, he took the beast on a round-the-world journey, which was an astonishing feat of diplomacy as well as aviation. Echner cast the Graf Zeppelin shadows over the whole of Europe, and even got Stalin to agree to a full Russian flyover. He did refuse to land in Russia during the trip because of adverse weather conditions, which would end up really aggravating Stalin. Echner was famous for his abundance of caution. He would only fly
Wait, so
in the
Stalin
most
was mad they
favourable
wouldn't
conditions
land?
and would drive his crew crazy with safety check after safety check, which partly goes to explain the Zeppelin company's unrivaled safety record when compared to any other airship company that was around at the time. After being given a rare audience with Emperor Hirohito of Japan, Echner made it across the Pacific and back to New York, where he was treated to yet another ticker tape parade. Even so, the round-the-world trip wasn't without incident. At one point encountering a high-altitude storm, the Graf was forced to land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Meanwhile, in the now times, we were struggling to even get off the ground. We are being told that perhaps the weather is not good enough to take the blimp
It
on
looks
board. So my
perfect.
dreams of blimp flight may be put on hold for now, but we're going to find out.
So can
I
these-
live in hope. So what is the issue with the weather?
It's the wind. It's not the wind on the ground, it's the wind up there.
It doesn't even look
see.
windy.
Still, I was
Oh
determined
my
to make
God.
my blimp dreams a reality.
So can these things just like not stand any kind of like weather conditions? Like even if there's like a slight breeze, you can't get them up in the air? Oh my God, that's stupid.
To take it up the chain of command with the blimp captain herself.
I mean, help us out here. Yeah, so it's very.
There's a lot of
There's a lot that
blimp
goes-
bureaucracy.
There is, yes.
So we've been told that sadly we cannot fly today. Kate, could you explain to us
Why?
Why aren't we allowed? Why aren't we allowed up in the sky?
It's not that you're not allowed. Zeppelins are relatively, for aircraft, slow moving. Basically, I don't know if you saw earlier when I was sitting in it, it just lifted itself up, one big gust, and it just lifted itself up, and it moves from side to side. The problem with that is if you start trying to take passengers in those conditions when it's on the ground and you've got people climbing up the ladder, and at the time when they're climbing up the ladder, it goes really fast sideways, or it lifts, God forbid, it lifts into the air. We have a safety record of 100% since 2001.
Just jump off.
We don't actually want to break it, and we don't want to hurt anyone, and that's why we say at 20 knots on the gun, which is forecast to be gusting 20. The reason it's not quite so windy here is because
I guess it does kind of look a little bit windy.
Oh, the humanity. The British
Fucking
airship
British.
industry was about as short-lived and successful as the leadership of another bloated British failure for the hot air. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. After nearly a decade of slow building, 2 British airships that were worthy competitors to Germany's gigantic offerings finally took off. The biggest of which was His Majesty's airship, the R-101, which inflated in 1929 and was the largest flying craft in the world, just about beating the Graf Zeppelin, if only in terms of girth, with 50 passenger cabins and a lounge spread out over 2 decks. Britain hoped it would be the first in a fleet of airships that would unite its empire. So it set out on its first voyage to Karachi, where the R-101 was set to show the world what British balloons
Holy
could do.
fuck, the thing's
Though the enormous and
huge.
overweight airship only made it to the north of France, before it lost altitude, crashed, and caught fire, killing 48 of the 54 passengers.
Just give up on these things. I guess they did. That's why you don't see them as
Going
much
up in
anymore.
flames, and we rushed through the fields on foot. So the first man we took was Church. He was wounded. My friend took him to the hospital. Then the second man I got was Leach, an engineer. And we found the other 2, Biggs and Bell, coming out of the thing. It was rather funny side and cruel side.
The embarrassment of the tragedy swiftly put an end to any further British airship ambitions, and the twisted aluminium waste of the R-101 skeleton was eventually sold for scrap to Germany, where it was repurposed for Eckener's next great project, and probably the only Zeppelin you knew about before watching this video. Disaster was looming for 1930s Germany in more ways than one. Hyperinflation had wrecked the German economy, and the Nazi Party was wrestling its way into power. The aging President Hindenburg at this point was little more than a figurehead, and the country was in such dire need of leadership that at one point Hugo Eckener was proposed as a serious unity candidate for president, though Hugo was far too busy building Zeppelins to seriously contemplate squaring up against the recently appointed Chancellor, Adolf Hitler. LZ-129 took its first official flight on March 4th, 1936, 2 years after the original human Hindenburg's internal gas bags had succumbed to cancer. Yes, I used that joke twice, but when history repeats itself so flagrantly, I don't see why I can't either. Hitler combined the roles of president and chancellor and declared himself Führer, which was bad news for everyone, but also specifically for Hugo Eckener. Over the years, Hugo had publicly criticized the Nazi Party and was even briefly arrested by them in 1933. Hitler reportedly hated Eckener and wanted to eliminate the Hindenburg, and not just because its name ended in Berg, but he did recognize that both of them were useful as propaganda tools. Ultimately, Eckener decided that he loved Zeppelins more than he hated Nazis. He accepted 6 million marks in public money from Joseph Goebbels' propaganda ministry and continued to live a comfortable life in Germany even during the war. The Graf Zeppelin and the Hindenburg were co-opted by the regime, appearing together at the 1936 Olympics, freshly graffitied with fascist geometry. As the Nazis solidified their control over the country,
The Nazis seriously
they
put
stripped Eckener
swastikas
of
on
any
everything.
power. He no longer called the shots at the Zeppelin company, and he was rarely ever able to fly the Hindenburg himself. For the rest of the ship's commercial life, he was replaced by Captain Ernst Lehmann, a wartime airship captain and Nazi party panderer. Lehmann was also a lot less risk-averse, at one point skipping test flights and flying in unfavorable conditions just to accommodate a propaganda flight for Hitler.
Of course.
In doing so, he damaged the great ship's swastika-covered fin in a case of foreshadowing that even a Hollywood screenwriter would balk at. And it really is such a shame, that the Hindenburg fell into the hands of the Nazis and Lehman, because it was a one-of-a-kind marvel, both as a ship and as a spectacle. So let's look at it in both those ways. For contemporary flyers, it's hard to visualize just how enormous the Hindenburg was. Now, of course, most of that length was made up of its mostly inaccessible aluminium skeleton, but its passenger space was still a sight to behold. Here, in some rarely seen footage taken by a family on a sightseeing trip, we can see what it was like to fly on the Hindenburg during its first
Holy shit.
and only year of transatlantic service.
It's like a whole diner inside of it.
Either side of its 50-bed passenger cabins were a writing room, a passenger lounge, and a fancy 47-foot dining room. To keep the Hindenburg afloat, anything that could be made of aluminium was, including the lounge's mini grand piano, made from the lightweight metal.
Are you fucking shitting me?
And here, I love this, we can hear exactly what it sounded like in this
I'll be right back.
staged footage taken while the ship was docked in the New Jersey Naval Station, where it would later meet its demise. If you were alive to see this enormous, gravity-defying structure circle the Empire State Building in 1937, it must have seemed like a miracle. But if you could afford a $450 ticket, which is about 10 grand in today times money, you might have noticed some of its drawbacks. By 1937, aeroplanes were nearly ready to zip commercial passengers across the Atlantic for a lot less money and in a fraction of the time, and you didn't arrive smelling like a foot. Still no shower on the Hindenburg, but there were plenty on the ocean liners that it was still in direct competition with for long-haul Atlantic journeys. And you could cram hundreds of people on them, along with on-board entertainment, half-decent food, and, ship-bound romance options. No one was getting painted like no French girl on the Hindenburg's cramped cabins. And while it took an iceberg to take down the Titanic, all it took for the Hindenburg was a single static shock.
First under flank. Get it started. It's fighting.
Oh shit.
It's terrible. Oh my, get out of the way, please. It's bursting into flames and it's falling on the morning fast and all the folks believe that this is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes.
This announcer. Oh shit, oh fuck, oh
no. It's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames.
I can't even understand what he's saying.
Crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast.
It's like
the moment the Hindenburg anchored in New Jersey on the 6th of May, 1937, it would loom larger as a tragedy than it ever would as a feat of engineering. It wasn't the first airship disaster, nor was it the deadliest, but it was the first disaster of its kind
Oh my
to be
God.
recorded on camera and shown on the newsreels. And the journalists who gathered to witness its mooring quickly understood the magnitude of their colossal scoop. "37 people lost their lives.
Shoot what?
Including 22 crewmen, 13 passengers, and a single ground fatality. Though there were 62 survivors, which can seem surprising when we see the scale of the fireball 100 years later. One survivor was Werner Franz, a 14-year-old boy who was
I
saved
recognize
from
that
the
name.
flames when a water tank above him burst. His mother and brother also survived, but the rest of his family perished. And when he died, so too did the final first-hand account of the Hindenburg disaster that was uninfluenced with viewing it as a media spectacle. And that's what I find so interesting about the Hindenburg. If you'll allow me to get a little conceptual for a minute, Karl Marx said that all great world historical facts appear twice. First
True.
as tragedy, then as farce. A quote that is pretty much proven by this finger puppet I
Our
have
boy
of the man
Carl
himself.
doesn't miss.
Here's the means of production, comrades, yippee! And it's true of the Hindenburg as well. The echo of the tragedy can be heard in direct retellings, but then also in dozens of cartoons from the 1990s onwards.
I chose the Hindenburg Flipbook series.
Cool. Oh, I have got to get to the buffet before we land.
Man, Rocco's Modern Life is the shit.
These, they're pretty cool.
What fucking show is this? Oh.
To the Hinden, Peter.
The Hindenburg exploded right at the
Oh,
beginning
man.
of the age of mass media, where images could first be repeated, distorted, and disseminated so easily that images could become more significant than the events that they actually depict. And it's this uniquely modern distortion that makes this recently unearthed footage so interesting.
Oh
Shot by an
my
amateur filmmaker,
God.
We can actually see behind the iconic image for the first time, closer to where the fire began, and maybe closer to a reality that has been distorted by time and media. Captain Ernst Lehmann also escaped the crash,
Wow.
but with burns all over his upper body and severe ones on his back. He was taken to the hospital where he spoke deliriously of an explosive device on board. And when he died, he was buried in what I believe is the only recorded Nazi funeral to ever take place on North American soil. Like the monumental media disasters that followed it, the fate of the Hindenburg was subject to a host of conspiracy theories and rumors. This is the thing about grand spectacles. They inspire shocking stories that live up to their shocking emotional effect. While Hugo Echner would later blame Lehmann's hasty landing for the eventual disaster, the likelihood is that it was an accident caused by a hydrogen leak and a few other fortuitous technical faults. But as we already know, coincidence has an annoying habit of writing history for us. As the conclusion of the First World War ended the first age of Zeppelins, the beginning of the Second World
How
War
fucking long
pretty
is
much
this
was
video?
off for good. The only place you
Oh,
could get
it's
helium
almost
at the
over.
time was in the US, and no one really
43
fancied their
minutes?
chances
Holy
boarding
shit.
a sky-bound hydrogen bomb. The American wing of the Goodyear Zeppelin Company severed all ties with their German collaborators, and even used their blimp-building powers to fight the Nazis. When Germany was defeated and the rest of Europe was reduced to a few piles of rubble and a wine cellar, America became the de facto home of airship construction. Goodyear bought back many of the blimps it had built for the war effort and converted them for civilian use. The company even proposed plans in collaboration with Hugo Echner to build a Hindenburg Beta, a 10 million cubic foot monster that never left the drawing board. Echner's old age and Nazi connections put a stop to any future airship projects, so he retired to his hometown, where he died remembered fondly by those who still did. People sure remembered the Hindenburg though, so they didn't really want to ride blimps, but they still loved looking at them. For the next 50 years, Goodyear would keep the dream of giant inflatable flying things alive, and even found practical uses for them beyond blimpy brand awareness. Since the 1960s, Goodyear blimps were used to capture aerial footage of sporting events like the US Open. Goodyear's
Yeah, it's pretty
presence
much the
in
only
sporting
time you
events
see
would
them
forever
nowadays.
associate blimps with good
If at
times
all.
in 20th century America. Their always improving capacity to put words in the sky have kept people craning their necks and shielding their eyes from the sun to behold their plump grandeur. The Goodyear blimp in Florida was even used to spread emergency information during floods and communication blackouts back in the 1990s. The Goodyear blimp is an iconic piece of Americana, cemented by the fact that around 20 Americans every year used a Goodyear as target practice, but a few puncture wounds aren't enough to keep a good blimp down.
That's
Riding
the
a
most
Goodyear blimp
American
is
thing I've
actually
ever
a
heard.
invitation-only privilege, which I begged very nicely for. And it's only because of Goodyear that blimps have stayed in the public consciousness for so long. Although, recently, they have been outsourcing their construction to a familiar name. In the 1980s, the Zeppelin Company rose from the ashes like some obese, slow-moving phoenix. It is a testament to the airship legacy that modern companies are still trying to reinflate them to this day. Bloodthirsty military contractors Lockheed
the
Martin
fuck is that
attempted to
thing?
blow new life into the airship back in the 2000s, although these remained experimental or just conceptual designs. The British company Airlander made some ill-fated attempts more recently, resulting in their only test vehicle plunging to the ground in the slowest air crash ever committed to film. No! 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 No one was hurt.
Wow. What did that say? Oh fuck, now I lost my spot. Contemplating the inscrutable nature of progress on board the Goodyear blimp. What?
I don't know what to say. It's floating. It's got no wings. It's unnatural. It scares me. I'm ready. I'm ready to face my fears of wingless flight. It's big. It's chunky. The few remaining airships are kind of an echo of a time where
so he
flight
finally
was still
gets to fucking
fanciful
fly in that
idea
thing.
rather than
Cool.
a modern chore. Their slow pace is why they were eclipsed by planes, and yet while riding one, that's exactly what reconnects you with the wonder they must have first inspired. We live in an age of wonders that would make a Victorian farm labourer shit themselves in abject horror at the alien world that they've been unnaturally forced to behold. It's comforting for us to see progress as a single straight line, taking us forever upwards to a higher, better place. Oh look, a cul-de-sac.
Yet at the same time, we're nowhere near as far along, like technologically and like futuristically, as like they predicted we would be back in the 60s. You know, when they were like coming out with cartoons like the Jetsons. I think the Jetsons is set in like 2003 or something, and they live in like fucking buildings that are like way up in the sky. They've got flying cars and shit. They've got robotic housemaids, but we don't have fucking any of that shit yet. I mean, we have the internet, which is pretty cool, but we're nowhere close to as technologically advanced as they predicted we would be, you know, 50, 60 years ago. So
Shadow looks sort of ominous, to be honest, but like a slow-moving missile or a poo. But history is deceiving. It's mostly a record of successes and horrific spectacles, which erase the lifetime of labour and unsexy failures that got us here.
It is weird being at this angle, being so close. I do feel a little bit like I'm playing SimCity, but you know, in a majestic, incredible kind of way.
I haven't played The Sims in so long.
There's the shard, and I'd be lying if I wasn't a little nervous about being in what is essentially a giant balloon next to a massive sky needle. But you know, that's the risks you run when you're blimping, baby. Straight blimping. Progress isn't
Straight
a straight line.
blimping.
It's a tangled mess of interlinking strands. And that is the lesson of the blimp. It's a humbling reminder from days gone dead that every success and innovation owes its existence to a parade.
She's got a shirt that
forgotten
says blimps.
And I guess, well, I just think that's really cool. Oh, and before you go, I've got some exciting news. I have written a comic book.
Okay, so that was... I feel like that was less interesting than I thought it was going to be. But, I mean, it was okay. It was like a mid-tier Ordinary Things video. Usually his videos are much more engaging than that, but it was fun. It was good for a test stream. I can't believe everything's still running just fine as of right now. It looks like the only trouble I was having was when I tried to switch to this scene here. I'm guessing it's just because it's like multiple video inputs going on at the same time, so that kind of slows down the CPU. We'll have to work on that one, but in the meantime, we can find something else to watch and keep testing it out. I've got a list of videos here to watch on stream. Let's see what looks a little bit more interesting than that. So let's go with the Cavernacle. Cavernacle is another newer kind of up and coming YouTuber. Very, very left wing. Makes a lot of great videos. Kind of goes like deep into depth about a lot of different stuff. So I've been a pretty big fan of his. Check out this video is called How Anti-Communism.
Reading the testimony of
Shut
family
up.
members who
Stop. How Anti-Communism Sanitizes Fascism from PragerU and DeSantis. This ought to be interesting. It's not loading. Come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stupid fucking thing.
Reading the testimony of family members who were the victims of brutal communist regimes always tugs at my heartstrings. I found a couple of these on Twitter and it really brought a tear to my eye. My great-grandfather had a monopoly of eggs in all of China, and my grandmother was super rich living in a mansion when the Cultural Revolution happened and communism took everything away.
Except it wasn't
the Soviet scum
communism.
invaded my country with the Nazis and then occupied us.
The Soviet Union was not communist. It was hardly even socialist. Like, by the time that the Soviet Union sort of came to power, they had completely betrayed every foundational socialist principle as laid out by Karl Marx or by any other like socialist philosopher and thinker before that. It's so absurd. They were another one of these nations that was socialist in name only, which these nations tend to be Marxist-Leninists, and Marxism-Leninism is, believe it or not, doesn't have anything to do with Marxism or Leninism. It's a bullshit propaganda ideology that was cooked up by Stalin when he was in power. That just serves totalitarianism and bad science, which is what led to so many famines and so much bullshit in the Soviet Union, the gulags. It's not socialism. Like, socialism fundamentally is a system of government or a system of like an economic system that is where the means of production is owned and operated and managed by the workers rather than the bourgeoisie. And that's not what you had in the Soviet Union. You had a giant state capitalist, a totalitarian state just running everything, and poorly, with tons of just garbage bureaucracy and tons of let's just continue this. Fucking A, I'm gonna be pissed.
They took most of my family's properties, our castles and our servants. Those bastards even took my grandma's favourite pony. She cried about this for decades. You are ignorant and know absolutely nothing about history to be claiming that. I had my grandfather's coconut factory stolen, my family's only source of income, in the 50s when they reclaimed it and housed corrupt governmental activities. Shame on you. That land where the farms were not inhabited before the Boers showed up. The blacks shouldn't have taken what is not theirs. Just like the Nasser Arab socialists shouldn't have taken my grandfather's plantation.
So this is just a bunch of people whose families were part of the aristocracy in Russia before the Bolshevik Revolution and before the Soviets took over. And I don't fucking care. These people are bastards. There's a reason that the Bolshevik Revolution happened, and it's because they lived in such a horrifically unequal society that the workers and the peasants all rose up and overthrew the Tsar. And it led to the Bolshevik Revolution, in which the Soviet Union came to power. Now, there's a lot of big mistakes that Lenin, in particular, made during the up and coming of this socialist society. One of them, in particular, being the Vanguard Party, which is basically what made it a one-party state and completely outlawed liberal democracy, or democracy in all forms, and basically handed the party over to the previously aristocratic people in that society and allowed them to run the society under socialism. So it was just capitalism 2.0 with more totalitarianism. But yeah, I don't feel bad for any of these fucking rich fucks who lost all their shit when the revolution happened. Fuck all of them.
Truly heart-wrenching stuff there. Who cannot sympathize with a family losing everything, such as their coconut plantation, or the land stolen from native Africans, or the monopoly on eggs in China, or castles in Eastern Europe? Who cannot sympathize? So today, what we're going to be talking about is victims of communism, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, and we're going to be talking about the equivocation between communism and Nazism, which a lot of people like to do. Now, hysteria around communism is a lot bigger in the United States and Canada than it is in the UK. But that's not to say it still doesn't enter the discourse. I remember Jeremy Corbyn being called like a Marxist, like it was inherently a negative thing. Obviously, he was compared to Stalin all the time because he is a socialist, literally one of the
We should do a video where we go over Jeremy Corbyn, because I'd like to learn more about him as well.
most pacifistic guys in UK politics, still compared to someone like Stalin. But people get a bit butthurt when I say this, but anti-communism as a political ideology, now keep that in mind, as a political ideology, not someone who isn't a communist, not someone who doesn't want a communist society. People who are anti-communist usually are apologists for fascists and usually buy into a lot of far-right arguments about communism, because there's no way you can reach the conclusion that communism killed 100 trillion billion without also counting among those victims either gross exploitative capitalists in the countries that were overthrown and had their land taken away, like in Cuba with plantations, or actual fascist soldiers who were killed in World War II, or similar fascist types who fought for the apartheid South African army, Rhodesia, who fought for South.
But at the same time, this is utterly missing the point, because the Soviet Union wasn't communist. Like, let's look up the definition of communism really quick. Communism definition. A political theory derived from Karl Marx advocating class war and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. There's another better definition. Let's just pull up the Wikipedia page for communism. Philosophical, social, political, and economic ideology and movement whose goal is the establishment of a communist society. So, and in Marx's thought, a communist society or the communist system is the type of society and economic system postulated to emerge from the technological advances and the productive forces representing the ultimate goal, blah, 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 blah. Common ownership. Synonym of socialism, but it's not. Socialism is the transitionary stage between capitalism and communism. Of course, there's different kinds of communism. Basically, the definition that I've always operated on is that communism is a stateless, classless, moneyless society in which all the means of production and all goods are publicly owned. And so you have no money, you have no ownership, there's no class system, there's no hierarchy in society. So, and obviously that wasn't gained at all during the Soviet Union. So they had basically just like a broken socialist system where the state ran everything, and it was loaded with bureaucracy and bad science, and that's why everything fucking failed, and it was totalitarian, and if you didn't fucking abide by the rules, you were shipped off to the goddamn gulags. What's socialist about that? Nothing. Anyways.
Of Vietnam, American soldiers in the Vietnam War. I wouldn't really call people killed in this context victims of communism when they're carrying out brutal genocidal imperialism on often native groups of people who have risen up and chosen socialism as the path to get to a country that they actually want to live in. So all of that coming up for you today, but before we go any further, please like the video and maybe subscribe. I guess for the comments, what is the most insane like anti-communist argument you've heard or what is the most like gross exaggeration about communism. Like the meme comes from somewhere that communism killed like 1 trillion people. Also consider becoming a patron. I try to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible, and the benefits of that are getting access to my Nintendo Switch friend code and the private patrons Discord server. Also check out my social media at the Cavankle on Twitter and on Instagram. Subreddit down in the description. Check out my second channel, the Cavankle Extra. I archive my live streams there, which I need to get better at doing. YouTube's just been really annoying about actually downloading the video at the moment, but I will get back onto that. But now let's get into the video. So like I said at the start, anti-communism as some sort of like political ideology is way bigger in America. A lot of the times politicians are obviously cynically doing it because they want to court the Latin American vote in places like Florida, which at least used to be important as a swing state. Not sure how true that will be going forward with people like DeSantis being very popular from Florida. But even Joe Biden continually and unjustifiably being hard on Cuba with the disgusting sanctions is in part motivated by trying to court some sort of Latino vote that they see as inherently.
And yeah, that's the other thing, is that people constantly say, oh, communism always fails everywhere it's tried. Oh, it always fails. Well, the reason that it always fails is because anytime like a socialist regime takes power in a country, the United States sanctions the fuck out of them, puts embargoes on them, and then tries to use the CIA to assassinate their leaders. And as a result, the leaders of these regimes get fucking paranoid as hell, and then they end up just becoming totalitarian in their paranoia to try to keep themselves in power and not be, you know, fucking nuked, or not nuked, but just assassinated by the CIA. And of course, with the sanctions and the embargoes, the economy falls apart because they have no good imports.
Anti-communist, because a lot of, for example, Cuban migrants in places like Miami, a lot of the older ones used to be part of the Cuban elite, and cry because their insanely racist and corrupt fascist state was overthrown by multicultural group revolutionaries and their plantations were taken away. But anyway, recently Ron DeSantis signed legislation to honor the victims of communism. So I want to get into the press release from his office, and then we're going to talk about this a bit more. So Governor Ron DeSantis signs legislation to honor victims of communism and preserve history of the Freedom Tower. DeSantis signed House Bill 395 establishing November 7th as Victims of Communism Day to honor the hundreds of millions of people who have suffered under communist regimes across the world. The governor also announced that he will approve $25 million in the budget to support renovations and restoration of the historic Freedom Tower in Miami. Additionally, the governor...
What a fucking waste of money. Are you kidding me? He's not going to use any money for like for climate change, like the impending climate change issues that Florida is facing. He's going to put $25 million to some stupid symbolic fucking gesture against communism. What a fucking joke.
Signed Senate Bill 160 to approve road designations across the state, including 3 designations to honor brave Cubans who fought against the Castro regime. Oh, those brave Cubans who were fascists, who allied with the mafia. Let's name every street after them. Do you see what I mean now about anti-communism being a political ideology which relies on either being a fascist or allying yourself with fascists? DeSantis saying, honoring the people that have fallen victim to the communist regimes and teaching our students about those atrocities is the best way to ensure that history does not repeat itself. Through HB 395 and the funding announced today, we are guaranteeing that the history of those who fled communist regimes and their experiences are preserved and not forgotten by our students. While it's fashionable in some circles to whitewash the history of communism, Florida will stand for truth and remain as a beachhead.
Oh my fucking
freedom.
God.
So doesn't this bill come from the governor, who may be the next president, of a party that claims to not want to indoctrinate kids? The left are indoctrinating your children in political ideologies, in gender ideologies. So we must also indoctrinate them in even more anti-communism than you get indoctrinated in growing up in the United States inherently anyway. Although DeSantis is probably a fascist anti-communist, a lot of this is just cynically done because he wants to shore up the Latino votes of people who've come from like Venezuela or Cuba. But as we're going to show you a bit later, so many of these memorials to victims of communism literally honor fascists. Just like these people are honoring Cuban fascists, another big one in places like Canada is honoring Ukrainians
Shocker.
who literally fucking did the Holocaust. So before we go into where all these crazy numbers about how many people communists killed, I wanted to show you a quick video from PragerU, and it's called "Why Isn't Communism as Hated as Nazism?" And it's basically trying to downplay the Nazis in some ways, equate the Nazis to the communists, and actually in some ways make communists seem actually worse than the Nazis. So have a look at a few clips from this video.
Given the unparalleled amount of human suffering communists have caused.
Look at this man. Oh my, his face looks like a fucking scrotum. I hate him so much. Oh my god, he's awful. He's like the most like, he's the quintessential like stereotype of the pissed off old Republican grandpa. Blah, and everything he says is complete and utter horseshit. Like there's not a single PragerU video which they get anything right. It's all absolute dog shit.
Caused, why is communist so much less a term of revulsion than Nazi? Communists killed 70 million people in China, more than...
Because communism is founded on a fundamentally good idea of equality, getting rid of class hierarchies, and for public ownership or collective ownership of the means of production, rather than a capitalist environment where you have a boss that's just taking advantage of workers and extracting the value that's created by their labor. Nazism is not founded on a good idea. It's founded on a fascist idea, a nationalist idea that worships particular races, and it's founded on race realism and all this other fucking pseudoscientific bullshit. That's why.
20 million people in the Soviet Union, not including about 5 million Ukrainians, and almost 1 out of every 3 Cambodians. And communists enslaved entire nations in Russia, Vietnam, China, Eastern Europe, North Korea, Cuba, and much of Central Asia. They ruined the lives of well over 1 billion people. Intellectuals in general, including, of course, the intellectuals who write history, are seduced by words, so much so that they deem actions as less significant than words.
What?
For that reason, they haven't focused nearly as much attention on the horrific actions of communists as they have on the horrific actions of the Nazis.
Because if the horrific actions that he's referring to were under regimes that weren't really communist or weren't really socialist. There's a ton of regimes that they're like North Korea that claim to be socialist and communist, but are the furthest thing from socialist or communist. The reason that that totalitarian regimes come to power and pretend to be communist or socialist is because the founding the ideology is good and it appeals to working class people, and so they pretend to be socialist and communist while completely just dominating them and instituting basically a fascist type of system. So we've never achieved true communism anywhere in the world at any time in history.
They dismiss the evils of communists as perversions of true communism until Russia and China and Vietnam and Cuba and North Korea.
Because that's fucking correct.
Acknowledge the evils their countries committed under communism. Communism's evils will remain less known than the evils of the German state under Hitler. In the view of the left, the last good war was World War II, the war against German Nazism and Japanese fascism. The left does not regard wars against communist regimes as good wars.
Yeah, because they weren't good wars. They were completely unjustified.
For example,
and they ended up worsening the problems. Our wars against countries like Vietnam and other communist regimes ended up fucking up their entire system while they were trying to get it in place and trying to achieve a socialist system or a communist system. And then we completely just fucked them over and then turned them more totalitarian than they would have ever been in the first place.
The American war against Vietnamese communism is regarded as immoral. And the war against Korean communism and its Chinese communist backers
wasn't communist.
Is simply ignored. Until the left and all the...
How are you going to sit here and argue that North Korea is communist? It's a country that worships their dictator as if he's a deity. And he's all powerful. They literally worship him like a god. There's no worker ownership of the means of production in North Korea or anything else that resembles a socialist ideology. They just call themselves that.
The institutions influenced by the left acknowledge how evil communism has been. We will continue to live in a morally confused world.
So do you guys need any more evidence that anti-communism as a political ideology usually just relies on people being massive racists and apologists for fascism? Also, I love how he's crying about people not liking the US war in Vietnam. And also just even throwing Vietnam in this is really bizarre. Like saying Vietnam has enslaved its own people when millions of them died fighting brutal imperialism and colonialism over like 30 years to create their own nation, right? And
Vietnam's
I know a lot
actually
of
doing
don't
pretty
like to
good
hear
nowadays
this,
too.
But countries like Vietnam and Cuba are infinitely better off than they were under right-wing capitalist dictators backed by the West. It's probably not surprising that Vietnamese people aren't running out trying to overthrow their government all the time when people see their lives improve. I also like how he's basically saying communists have killed more people. And also we're going to get into the broad generalization. So how is Pol Pot like Ho Chi Minh? How is Pol Pot like Che Guevara or Fidel Castro? They're not even remotely the same. Also, a lot of these anti-communists leave out who overthrew Pol Pot? Vietnamese communists overthrew him. And also on that note, Vietnam also went to war against China and Cambodia in this time period. So doesn't this kind of throw a bit of nuance on this whole conversation that communism killed X, Y, and Z? Because the sources for the numbers of deaths under communism are so dubious, I really think that the Black Book of Communism and Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation probably put the communists dying in that war between Cambodia, Vietnam, and China in the victims of communism. And I bet apartheid Nazi South Africans and Rhodesians who died fighting African communists are also put in there, the same with American colonialist soldiers in Vietnam and South Vietnamese as well. Because as we all know, you're definitely a victim if you commit brutal violence in the name of a racist state against native people. And those people rising up and fighting back makes you a victim, of course. That's how we all understand victimhood. So equating Nazism with communism has been a popular thing forever. Liberals like to do this, conservatives like to do this. But where do these like crazy numbers come from? Where did the apologetics for fascists come from? Now, obviously people have always said like communism is oppressive and all this stuff, and what Stalin did and what Pol Pot did, that actually represents communism the best. And relative success stories in terms of improving people's lives by certain metrics like Vietnam and Cuba are thrown in with them as well. Well, it comes from something called the Black Book of Communism, written in the 1990s by a couple of authors, with two of them actually saying that the book is inaccurate. So let's get into this. So I'm not just going to focus on Wikipedia, but I'm actually quite surprised at the nuance it takes with this subject. I was actually thinking it was going to be a lot worse. So the Black Book of Communism, Crimes, Terror and Repression, is a 1997 book by Stephen Courtois, Andrzej Pakowski, Nicholas Wirth and Jean-Louis Margolin, and several other European academics documenting the history of political repression by communist states, including genocides, extrajudicial killings, deportations and deaths in labour camps, and famines. And again, to kind of further prove my point about anti-communism going hand in hand with fascism, according to historian John Wiener, the Black...
Oh, it's already freezing. Come on, man.
Book of Communism received both praise and criticism. The book was especially controversial in France because it was published during the 1997 trial of Nazi collaborator Maurice Papon for crimes against humanity for his role in the deportation of Jews from Bordeaux to Hitler's death camps. Papon's lawyers introduced the book as evidence for the defense. And of course, lumping all communist nations in together is always pretty dubious, but historian Alexander Dalling questioned whether all these cases from Hungary to Afghanistan have a single essence and thus deserve to be lumped together just because they're labelled Marxist or communist is a question that the authors scarcely discuss. Historian Michael David Fox criticised the figures as well as the idea to combine loosely connected events under a single category of communist death toll blaming courtois for their manipulation and deliberate inflation, which are presented to advocate communism. In particular, David Fox criticised the idea to connect the deaths with some sort of generic communism concept, defined down to the common denominator of party movements founded by the intellectuals. So because I'm on this angle of most anti-communists being fascist or fascist adjacent, there was a good article I read on Medium. Now, I obviously take things from Medium with a pinch of salt, but this article was good because it literally just showed something from the book, which I want to talk about. So, debunking communism killed more people than Nazism. So some of the major criticisms against the Black Book of Communism includes the fact that it counts the following as victims of communism: some Nazis and their collaborators who were killed by the Soviet Union during World War II, people who died in the 1921 Russian famine, which was caused by drought, the whites stealing food, civil war. And it seems pretty insane to attribute that to communism when the communists have been fighting a war to take over Russia during this time. Other hunger-related deaths caused by the Nazi war against the Soviet Union, and many other incidents that were dishonestly attributed. But like I was alluded to at the start, a lot of the victims of communism are actually fascists who did the Holocaust, and this is true in a lot of the victims that came out from Ukraine. I'm going to talk about this a bit more. I've actually spoke about this a lot when I've been covering Ukrainian Nazism as well. So the author describes a passage from the Black Book of Communism where it portrays the OUN and UPA Nazi collaborators as heroic victims of communism who fought against the commies and Jews. They are responsible for pogroms in Ukraine, where they murdered tens of thousands of Jews, Polish, and other ethnic minorities, alongside the German Nazis. And I'm not going to get into contemporary Ukraine today, but let's just say, in recent years,
bro, Ukraine has been through so much fucking shit.
Officially been recognized.
Like from fucking World War II to like Chernobyl to the shit they're going through now with the Russian invasion.
Western Ukraine from September 1939 to June 1941 had brought about the formation of a fairly powerful armed resistance movement, the OUN, or Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. Members of this organization subsequently enlisted as special troops in SS units to fight communists and Jews. In July 1944, when the Red Army arrived, the OUN set up a Supreme Council for the Liberation of Ukraine. Roman Trochovich, the head of the OUN, became the commander of the UPA, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. According to Ukrainian sources, the UPA had more than 20,000 members by the autumn of 1944. As for the 37,000 soldiers who were taken prisoner during this time, all were sent to gulags. So 37,000 Ukrainian Nazis being sent to gulags for doing the Holocaust and fighting on the sides of the Nazis. I mean, I don't really have much of an issue with that. I certainly wouldn't describe them as victims of communism when these people carried out brutal killings on innocent people and marginalized groups in Ukraine. Let's also remember, in terms of Ukraine, where did a lot of these soldiers who didn't get captured flee to? Canada and the UK. So when you see SS memorials erected in Canada, this is why. Because a lot of the fighters against the Soviet Union in the Second World War were actually Nazis. And like I said again, these two groups have been honored.
Is that a thing? There's SS memorials in Canada? Hold on, I gotta fucking look this up. SS memorials, Canada. Canada's Nazi monuments? Come on, load. You piece of shit. Oof, my PC is so stressed right now. I need to get a fucking new CPU. Why isn't this loading now? Come on. You're almost there. Let's do it. Come on. Seriously? Fuck it. Who cares? We'll look it up later.
By the Ukrainian government in recent years. I only bring that up because I've got a lot of pushback, even on really old videos I've made about Ukrainian Nazis from like 2 years ago, of people acting like Eastern Europe and Ukraine don't have an especially prominent problem with its views towards Nazism. Moving forward, the critics of the book's claim of 94 million people killed by communism include some of the book's own authors. One of them is particularly noteworthy, is Nicholas Wirth, who is responsible for writing much of the book. He's on record saying the allegations of a death toll of communism during the 20th century of beyond 85 million as being non-clarified and unjustified. Continuing, he says from that book that the highest possible estimate is 93 million, while the lowest being 65 million. In another instance, he also admitted that he alleged 15 million deaths by the Soviet Union, and Courtois, the editor, seemingly pulled 5 million deaths out of thin air, which just so coincidentally happens to be about as many Nazi soldiers that were killed in World War II by the Soviet Union. So I'm showing you there that a lot of these works about the victims of communism literally just take the numbers of actual fascists and Nazis killed by the Soviet Union. Like, even if you hate the Soviet Union and obviously like hate Stalin, you can admit one of the good things they did was defeat the Nazis in the Second World War.
I mean, yeah.
And you wouldn't be crying about Nazis killed by the Soviet Union, right? Or Nazi collaborators who actually face justice in rare instances. I would rather thousands of fascists go into gulags than the typical Western response of actually putting them in post-war governments and like all the collaborators in Greece basically getting let off and put in the post-war government to fight the communists. Shinzo Abe's grandfather, this Class A war criminal, let off by the Allies and eventually became Prime Minister of Japan, probably would rather these people face some sort of punishment than be rewarded for allying themselves with actual Nazis. But let's move on to how the Black Book of Communism has influenced other things and just talk about like general anti-communism in the West. So Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, we'll get into its origins a bit, but on its research page it says, far too many young people today have no idea about the massive killings, imprisonments and destructiveness wrought by communist regimes throughout history. From the famines, purges and deportations and gulags in the USSR to Mao's Great Leap Forward, communists have killed more than 100 million people according to the Black Book of Communism, very objective source. Countless more suffered and suffer still. Our expert scholars conduct research to show the atrocities committed by communist regimes past and present. These academics are very, very rigorous. So rigorous that they come out with stuff like this. Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation adds global coronavirus deaths to its tally of historical victims of communism. The announcement comes as part of the VOC's report on the timeline of Chinese Communist Party's cover-up of its COVID-19 outbreak in Wuhan and its continued efforts to obfuscate its role in the pandemic. The organisation also pointed to the World Health Organization as working to carry water for Chinese leader Xi Jinping. To date, more than 95,000 people have died of coronavirus globally. Maybe a bit preemptive, victims of communism, when the US has literally the worst death toll in the world and is probably responsible for multiple mutations of this virus. And the director, Marian Smith, said, "We knew China was lying and misleading the rest of the world about the virus that originated in Wuhan, but the extent of their continued deceit and their predatory behavior shocks the conscience. The WHO has abdicated its responsibility to the entire world population in order to carry water for the Chinese communist regime." So yeah, that was like 95,000 deaths before, you know, untold millions were killed by it, and of course a very large number in the United States, which had multiple governors like anti-communist Ron DeSantis actually cover up the numbers of deaths and enacted no medical restrictions to stop the flow. I really think China is the guilty party here and not people who took the virus less seriously. So talking about its foundation, the foundation came into being in 1994 after its founders Lee Edwards, Lev Dobryansky and Brzezinski, this is Mika Brzezinski's dad, who worked for the Carter administration, were a group of conservative individuals, staunch anti-communists and bureaucrats and academics that interestingly and yet unsurprisingly bear connections to the Nazi war machine. For instance, one of the founders, Lev Dobryansky, a Ukrainian nationalist, prior to the formation of the VOC, was also the founder and chairman of the National Captive Nations Committee, an anti-communist advocacy group formed in 1959. The co-chair of the NCNC was a Ukrainian Nazi collaborator, Yaroslav Stetsko, who was also the leader of the fascist organization of Ukrainian nationalists and the anti-Bolshevik bloc of nations, both of which worked with Hitler and sought the destruction of communism. So Brzezinski was the national security advisor and kind of like the architect behind Operation Cyclone. I actually wrote my undergrad dissertation on the Carter administration, so I've written a lot about him. Basically just a crazy anti-communist, wanted to like invade El Salvador and like project American military power around the world. Thankfully Jimmy Carter and the rest of the administration were actually not very much like him. So the other founder, Lee Edwards, is an anti-communist who assisted in the founding the Youth Conservative Action Group, the Young Americans for Freedom in 1960, and was a former chairman of the VOC. He is also a distinguished fellow of highly influential conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation.
Of course.
So it's not surprising
behind everything, man.
Of communism
Fucking Heritage Foundation.
Despite being like fairly influential, despite I think having both political parties voting for it to be formed in the first place, isn't a very reliable source on the supposed victims of communism, mainly because it's rife with fascists as well, which, like I've always said, most anti-communists are, and a lot of the time it is Ukrainian fascists, and here is further evidence of this. Massive problem in Canada is that you keep seeing fascist Ukrainian symbols, but Victims of Communism Memorial received donations honouring fascist Nazi collaborators according to a website. A controversial monument being built in Ottawa to honour the victims of communist regimes has received donations in honour of known fascists and Nazi collaborators. It's being financed partly through a Buy a Brick campaign called Pathways to Liberty, which is run by registered charity Tribute to Liberty. The campaign sells virtual bricks that appear on the organisation's website and in their newsletter. The bricks are dedicated to alleged victims of communism, but some donors seem to be attempting to sanitize the records of known fascists and war criminals. An organisation calling itself the General Committee of United Croats of Canada purchased virtual bricks dedicated to Ante Pavelic, describing himself only a doctor of laws. Pavelic was a wartime leader of Ustaza, the fascist organisation that ran the independent state of Ukraine, a Nazi puppet regime, and if you've read anything about them, people who were involved in this regime are literally some of the worst fascists in the entire war, and that's saying something. In this role, Pavelic was the chief perpetrator of the Holocaust in the Balkans, approximately 32,000 Jews, 25,000 Roma, and 330,000 Serbs were murdered by the regime. The same organisation purchased a brick to Mile Budak, whom they identified simply as a poet. He was a high-ranking Ustaza official. An organisation calling itself the Knightly Order of Vitez purchased 5 bricks. Several members of the order participated in the persecution and in 1944 the deportation of Hungarian Jews. Vitez members included high-ranking members of the Nazi puppet government established late in the war, which organised the deportation of 437,000 Hungarian Jews, the biggest and fastest deportation action of the Holocaust. The League of Ukrainian Canadians Edmonton branch, meanwhile, purchased 5 virtual bricks in honour of Roman Shukovich, who led the Ukrainian insurgent army during World War II and was responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of Belarusian Jews, Poles and Ukrainians. The UPA was the armed wing of the Organisation of Ukrainian Nationalists, Bandera faction, and here's the general problem with Ukrainian fascism that a lot of people seem to not want to admit when I talk about it. While Shukovich and the OUNB were anti-Semitic and totalitarian, most of the admirers today are not. Per Anders Rudling, a historian at Lund University in Sweden, they remembered what they want to remember, a sanitized whitewash image of a heroic officer. He was a Nazi collaborator and an ethnic cleanser. The units under his command massacred Jews and Poles. Obviously, I don't agree with this, but a monument to the victims of communism is fair and legitimate. Don't agree with that part. Millions of people were murdered by Stalin and Mao, and there's a case to be made for commemoration. It's peculiar, however, that people who committed genocide are being glorified along with these legitimate victims. I mean, per Anders Rudling, it's not very peculiar if you know anything about anti-communism that loads of anti-communists are actually fascists. So I'm hoping you're seeing a pattern, and I'm hoping if you're someone watching this video who thinks you're an anti-communist, realize your allies are mostly fascists, right? They're either far-right conservatives in America, or they're like actual fascists, or they're people who are willing to turn a blind eye to actual fascist people in history and actual fascism to make some sort of political point about what they perceive as communist totalitarianism. I wish some of these people would care about the victims of capitalism just as much as the supposed victims of communism, who coincidentally a lot of the time turn out to be fascist collaborators in World War II. I'm perfectly happy to admit there have been people victimized by regimes run by communist parties throughout the world throughout history. Got no problem admitting that. Got no problem criticizing Stalin. Got no problem criticizing some things that Mao did. But I recognize a lot of what they did as a symptom of authoritarianism, and that's why often people think, well, Nazism is comparable to communism because certain elements of Stalin's regime look like certain elements of Hitler's as well. But the difference being, Stalin didn't rule the Soviet Union for most of its existence. Soviet Union didn't always look like Stalin's Russia in the 1930s. And lots of communist countries today look nothing like the Soviet Union in the 1930s, whether that be Cuba or Vietnam or even China today. As much as I don't think these countries are communist utopias, I'm not going to be hysterical with
They literally aren't by
allying
definition.
myself with actual fascists to try and make a point that somehow fascism and capitalism is freedom, but communism is slavery. So I read a good article in the Jacobin. I just want to share a tiny bit of it. And it's about anti-communism. And it says, what democratic socialists should think about anti-communism? And I thought it was quite interesting, because I don't consider myself a democratic socialist from my understanding of the term, but I did like their take on this stuff and their take on anti-communism as a whole. So an interview with Kristen R. Godsey and Scott Sihon. The democratic socialist tradition has always been one opposed to the abuses of Stalinism.
True.
Any socialism worthy of the name must have democracy at its core. But
True.
anti-communism has never been about defending freedom and democracy.
This is what I've been saying the entire fucking time. This is everything that I've been struggling to get out of my mouth because I'm still not a very good public speaker and I'm still getting practice at this. But this right here, the democratic socialist tradition has always been one opposed to the abuses of Stalinism. Any socialism worthy of the name must have democracy at its core. Yes, but anti-communism has never been about defending freedom and democracy. It's about destroying the left and defending the atrocities committed in the name of capitalism. 100%.
Democracy, it's been about destroying the left and defending the atrocities committed in the name of capitalism. As Ralph Miliband and Marcel Liebman wrote in 1984, anti-communism condemns the political and human abuses of communist dictatorships, but very often condones or simply ignores the abuses and crimes of right-wing regimes. Such regimes, however tyrannical and criminal they may be, can count on the steadfast support of the United States and other capitalist states, all of course in the name of the defense of democracy and freedom. But anti-communists will say 100 million people died under communism, or they will show a picture of a Chinese man in a uniform about to execute a woman and say, this is socialism, and the conclusion that's implied is that we should reject communism and socialism. But
they never define socialism. They never do.
But the conclusion doesn't follow. There's no logical link. You need to provide some sort of intermediate premise to make it follow, and they aren't explicit about that. We attempted to make the argument valid, meaning that the conclusion logically follows from the premises. To make it valid, you could say that if any country is based on a particular ideology, that it did many horrible things, then the ideology should be rejected. Then the conclusion that communism should be rejected would follow from that statement that many horrible things happen under communism. But if that's the argument, then of course we could run a perfectly parallel argument about capitalism. We merely need to point out that the United States and United Kingdom and other countries based on capitalist ideology had done many horrible things, and it would follow that capitalism should be rejected.
That's a fucking
understatement. If they have a more
understatement.
subtle argument, they could say that if any country based on a particular ideology did horrible things, and if those horrible things are the natural conclusions of that ideology, then it should be rejected. That's reasonably plausible. But then to make the argument valid, you have to assert that the famines and the purges and the restrictions of rights under Stalin and Mao were the natural outcomes of the communist ideology.
But they're
and then
not.
this opens up the possibility that countries based on a capitalist ideology have done many horrible things, and these things are the natural conclusions of capitalist ideology, and therefore capitalism should be rejected. Of course, a defender of capitalism will say that the horrible things are not a natural outcome of the ideology of capitalism. They will say, where did you find in Adam Smith that we should be enslaving people? We kind of let it go in an article, but actually it's a little harder for capitalists to defend their positions. Milton Friedman famously had what he called the Friedman Doctrine, which basically held that the capitalists should do whatever makes the most money, and if they worry about things like social goods, like avoiding pollution or ending discrimination, that they're violating their obligation to the shareholders because their job is to make as much money as possible, so long as they play within the rules of the society. Well, in the antebellum South, the rules of society allowed enslaving human beings, and so, by Friedman's own argument, people running plantations had an absolute moral obligation to enslave people because that was the way that they made as much money as possible until the rules of the game changed. So it's actually a little harder for the capitalists to say that some of the horrible things don't follow from the ideology of capitalism, given the right social conditions. And Megan Day responding, and I like this as well, not only is there nothing in the writing of Marx and Engels that points to the necessity of any of the processes that culminated in famines or purges, but it is also the case that you had mass famines in India and China, and the late 19th century, as Mike Davis writes about in the book Late Victorian Holocausts, under colonial supervision from the United Kingdom. You can find direct quotes from Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations that say things like, famine has never arisen from any other cause but the violence of the government, attempting by improper means to remedy the inconvenience of dearth. The takeaway being that the reason for famine is that the government is meddling too much, So the government needs to step back and allow things to naturally run their course and prices to reset and equilibrium to re-establish itself. The British simply followed that advice, resulting in the deaths of tens of millions of people in India and China. So given that example, I think we can make a much stronger case that capitalism's body count does owe to the ideology of capitalism in a way that communism's body count, which we of course acknowledging as a real thing here, isn't traceable to the ideology espoused by Marx and Engels. And I really like the points they're making, and just to underscore that a tiny bit, obviously something, you know, from my own family history into Irish potato famine, which is taught to us in school, like it's just, you know, something that happened to Ireland, something that happened that couldn't be stopped. So most of us were taught in school that the Irish potato famine, which took place between 1845 to 1852, was caused by an unknown fungal blight that wiped out the potato crop of the Emerald Isle just at a time when too much of the population was dependent on a single type of potato for daily sustenance. While the blight did strike and take down most of Ireland's potatoes, the truth is that Ireland was exporting more than enough food to feed everyone at the same time as the famine was happening. Run as a colony of the British Empire, Ireland was a colonial food-producing operation much like India and the sugar islands of the Caribbean, but the locals were not allowed to eat the very food they were producing. In other words, a million Irish starved.
That's what happens when you don't fucking have
Ireland's
socialism.
economy has always been made subservient to British interests. Professor Christine Keneally says, following the appearance of the potato blight, a number of people in Ireland requested the government to close the Irish ports to keep food inside the country. The British refused to do so on the grounds that merchants would bring food in under free market forces. Of course, this didn't happen. On the eve of the famine, for example, Ireland was exporting sufficient quantities of corn, wheat and barley and oats to Britain to feed an estimated 2 million people. Clearly, Ireland was producing an agricultural surplus. The British government at the time of the famine is often described as being committed to the laissez-faire, that is, non-intervention in the marketplace, says Professor Keneally. However, the British government was the most interventionist government in the world when it came to their commercial and other interests. A stark example of this is the Opium War. So I think this is a good point to end the whole video on. The ideology of Adam Smith and Milton Friedman can be directly linked to things like famines in China, India, and in particular, the Irish potato famine. There's justification in the works of people like Adam Smith and Milton Friedman that the people who were enslaving Africans and selling them or keeping them enslaved to, you know, work in their plantations were actually doing something moral because it made as much profit as possible. People like Ayn Rand said the Native Americans deserve to be genocided because they weren't using the land to generate profit. Capitalism has always been an inherently genocidal ideology because it prioritizes profit above all else, especially if you are working in the legality of a system created by the capitalist class, who do not care about things like human rights or the rights of different people. The Belgian Congo, perfect example. How many people killed for rubber? How many Africans brutalized by the Belgians? The American South, how many African slaves brutalized and sold as a product, and of course kept in plantations, made to work as property, no rights, no pay, no anything. That's capitalist ideology. And even more broadly, things like the Cold War. Why did the US conduct this genocidal war in Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam? To stop them from going communist. Why didn't they want them to go communist? Because they wanted to protect their dominance on global markets.
Then they can't profit
More
off of
communist
them.
countries means less dominance in the global market. It's motivated by capitalism. Just as Lenin pointed out, imperialism is a form of capitalism. And this profit at all costs economic system is literally destroying the planet. There's been wildfires in London because a few corporations throughout the last 50 years will do everything to make maximum profit, including contributing to destroying the entire planet. When are we getting the Victims of Capitalism Memorial Foundation? Because like these two people argued in the Jacobin, and like I'm making the argument now, there is way more evidence that capitalism killed far more people in the time communism supposedly killed 100 million. Are we going to pretend the competition for resources, profit and goods in World War I and the competition of empire wasn't motivated by capitalism? Are we going to pretend European colonialists working for literally private corporations, enslaving people, killing natives, putting people into indentured servitude, are we going to act like they're not capitalists now? While I'm perfectly happy to admit, yes, Stalin was a bad guy, Mao did bad things, Kim Jong-un is a bad guy.
Not communist.
I'm not willing to admit there is anything in Karl Marx and Engels that says they should have organised society in this way. Stalinism is not something I want for the UK, right? I want communism more in the vein of Marxism adapted for an extremely wealthy
Real
nation.
Marxism.
That's why I feel perfectly comfortable being like communist and not feeling guilty for what Stalin did. I do not see that as representative of my ideology. But if you are a capitalist, there are so many things, whether you be an extremist capitalist, objectivist capitalist like Ayn Rand, whether you follow Adam Smith, whether you follow Milton Friedman and stuff like that, so many of these atrocities, famines, genocide, are literally the result of capitalism espoused by capitalist intellectuals. Anyway, that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for
Damn, I fucking love the Tabernacle. That video was fucking perfect. He fucking nailed it in that video. Like, every single point was fucking 100% on point. Seriously, if you're not subscribed to the Tabernacle, go subscribe to him because he's fucking awesome. And he puts out regular videos all the fucking time, and they're all this good. Alright, so I think I'm probably going to wrap it up and then check out my video afterward to see how everything turned out. But before I do that, I want to play with my spider because he was distracting me the whole time I was trying to watch these videos. And I think I'll show you guys what he looks like. Come on, come on. Don't be scared. Oh, no. So exciting every single time I go to touch him. Don't be scared. Come here, come here. Ooh. Oh, shit. Oh, fuck. Look at him. I suppose you can't really tell what he actually looks like because of the fucking hue shift that I have on my camera. Wonder if I could just turn that off quick. Ooh, it's a little feisty today. Trying to turn off the color correction on my camera so you can see him better. Be better. He's by far the biggest one that I have as of right now. I had a bigger one, but he was a mature male when I got him, so, and mature males don't live very long. I'm gonna pull up a video actually on this specific species. Yeah, that's what we'll do. Hey, buddy.
Recently of New World tarantulas, I only gave this one an honorable mention. And after spending a lot of time going through photos and videos and dealing with the tarantulas, trying to
scare my tarantula if I don't stop shouting. This is, yeah, the Antilles Martinique Pinto, or the Carabina versicolor.
Carabina versicolor, or you may be more familiar with its common name, the Martinique or Antilles Pinto tarantula. This species was known for a long time as the Avicularia versicolor, but was recently reclassified to the genus Carabina. This is a gorgeous species that starts off as a bright blue spiderling until it molts into its adult coloration of greens, purples, and reds.
Wish you could see his colors better, but I have all these colored lights in here. So he just ends up looking like a shade of pink.
This is a New World arboreal tarantula that is endemic to the areas of the Caribbean, Martinique, and the Lesser Antilles. This is a medium growth tarantula with females living around 12 years and reaching a size of 5 to 6 inches, while males live around 2 to 3 years and are an inch or two smaller. This is a fairly docile species that is known to have mild venom, but can be fast and have a tendency to jump. For many years, this species was considered to be difficult to keep and was known to fall victim to what was called sudden avic death syndrome, which was a general term used to explain a higher rate of this species randomly dying in captivity. At that time, it was believed that humidity was key to the husbandry of this species based on the environmental conditions of the area this tea comes from. So in an attempt to keep the humidity in the enclosures up, ventilation was usually reduced, or keepers would mist the inside of the enclosure daily, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. What was not fully taken into consideration at the time was that these teas lived in the trees, and even though the environment was traditionally a humid one, these teas made their homes in the trees where the coastal winds were prevalent and provided excellent air circulation. They also took refuge inside tree trunks and crevices or under building or large leaves during downpours. So the key to keeping this species wasn't so much the humidity you provide, as it was making sure the tea had excellent ventilation. I keep my C versicolors at room temperature, like most of my tarantulas. If you're comfortable, they're comfortable. My spiderling versicolors are housed in a large dram vial with appropriately sized holes drilled into the sides of the enclosure with a little moist substrate in the bottom, and I provide a twig or sliver of cork bark for them to climb and use as anchor points for their webbing. As spiderlings, they tend to make their homes closer to the ground, so I provide them with some sphagnum moss and broken up dried leaves to use as camouflage for their webbing. As juveniles, I house them in basic acrylic arboreal enclosures with more height than weight. These are simple, clear AMAC boxes that measure 4 by 4 by 7 1/4 inches and sell for less than $5 a piece. I will provide some links for them down below in the description. I drill plenty of ventilation holes on opposite sides of the enclosure, just over halfway or 2/3 the way up. This will help provide ample cross ventilation. I intentionally do not drill any ventilation holes on the top of the enclosure to help retain some of the humidity, even while providing the cross ventilation. I usually build this type of enclosure for this particular species upside down from how the box would normally stand. At this stage of life, this tea tends to make web tunnels at the top of the enclosure, and if you have to take the lid off the top to fill up the water dish and feed, you will be constantly destroying the versicolor's webbing. For adults, you can make a similar style enclosure from larger, clear acrylic boxes if you're into the do-it-yourself aspects of the hobby. There are also plenty of businesses that make acrylic arboreal enclosures for adults that have ideal cross ventilation. Personally, I convert 5 or 10 gallon aquariums into arboreal enclosures, and I also use the Exoterra Nano Tall and Small Tall enclosures with a few modifications. These are glass enclosures with ventilation just under the front door, as well as the top of the enclosure. I usually replace the screen top of the Exoterras with a sheet of plexiglass that I cut to fit and drill in some holes for ventilation, then glue or silicone it into place. That way there is no worry of the tea chewing its way through the screen or getting its toes caught. For juveniles and adults, I keep their substrate dry, but provide a larger than normal water dish with plenty of surface area and let the natural evaporation of the water provide the humidity the tea prefers.
Chill out,
Using
buddy.
this type of setup has worked for many years, and the only deaths I have had were natural and due to old age. When it comes to feeding, I give my spiderlings small crickets or roaches that I pre-kill for the smallest slings and drop in live for the larger slings. I don't feed them any live prey larger than 2/3 the size of the sling. These spiderlings will scavenge, so there is no harm in playing it safe and dropping pre-killed prey on their webbing or near the entrance of their burrow. Because I keep the substrate in my slings enclosures a little moist and usually provide them water by dripping it onto their webbing, it is important to remove any uneaten prey or prey parts within 24 hours of feeding to avoid mold growth and mites. As juveniles, I feed 2 medium crickets once a week, more or less depending on their appetite and size of their abdomen. If their abdomen appears swollen but they're still taking food, I may only feed them 1 cricket at a time until they refuse food or molt. For adults, I feed my versicolors 2 or 3 large crickets every week or 2.
Uh-oh, I can't see them.
These are excellent eaters as adults and can surprise you by quickly jumping on their prey as soon as they sense it. I try not to overfeed my teas, but if their abdomen isn't looking way too big, I may feed them closer to every week or 10 days. I also sometimes mix it up a little and feed them a mealworm or dubia, but my versicolors have never shown any interest in waxworms. Though they don't like waxworms, they do like the moths that they grow into. So occasionally I will let a few waxworms grow to maturity as a special treat every now and then.
Where the fuck did
The
he go?
moths are generally a hassle to deal with and get into the enclosure, so I don't make a habit of it. The Carabiner versicolor is a stunning tarantula that is always a crowd pleaser. Now usually I avoid handling most of my tarantulas, but sometimes the versicolor gives me no choice. As juveniles and adults, this tea has occasionally jumped onto my hand while I was feeding or watering, and usually will go on a stroll anytime I am rehousing it. If this ever happens to you, don't panic. It is common for them to jump, and they probably aren't going to bite you. And if they do, their venom is very mild and probably poses no health risk unless you randomly happen to have a rare allergy to it. These teas have type 2 urticating hairs, which means they don't kick a cloud of them at you when they feel threatened, but transfer of their hairs come from direct contact. So if it rubs its abdomen on you, or you pet it, or somehow come in contact with the hairs on the abdomen, be sure to thoroughly wash your hands after handling. And be careful not to rub your eyes or touch any parts of your body that may be exceptionally sensitive to the hairs. As with most teas, it is highly advised that you keep them away from your face, as you don't want to risk urticating hairs getting in your eyes, nose, or mouth. What's up, Tarantula Collective? My name is Richard, and thank you for checking out this video today. The Carabiner versicolor is such a cool tarantula, and I was probably like a lot of people. When I first got mine, I was very nervous about its husbandry. I had read a lot of care sheets online. There was so much conflicting information. Even today, I still get messages from people in our Facebook group or on Instagram with a lot of questions concerning the Carabiner versicolor. There are still so many outdated care sheets and bad information out there that it makes it really confusing for new people. So part of the reason I wanted to make this video was just to kind of tell you what I'm doing. I'm by no means an expert. I don't have any degrees in arachnology or biology or anything close to that. This is just my hobby, just something I enjoy to do, and I'm just sharing my experience.
Freaks me out about
with this method that I use, I've had a lot of success. So I'm pretty confident in it, but I'm sure there are other people out there with different methods or slightly different ways of doing things that's very successful for them. Now, if you were to send me a message or just you knew me on the street or something like that and you were to ask me, this is exactly the information I would give you. I don't miss, I give plenty of ventilation, and I keep my substrate dry. Now, I don't just use this for the Carabiner versicolors. This is also how I keep pretty much all my
Those of you who are
aviculariae.
wondering, this is Richard of the Tarantula Collective, one of the fucking sickest YouTube channels ever. Oh shit, I'm losing him again. Hey, buddy. Ooh. Even if you're not like into like keeping tarantulas and all that shit, his channel's just fun in general to watch. So, oh fuck, he just jumped. Hey, buddy. No. There you go. Oh, he's so cool. I can't wait until he gets bigger. These guys get to be about 4 to 5 inches. Right now he's a juvenile. I'm not even sure if it's a he or a she. I hope it's a she because the females live longer. Oh, so colorful. Got like a green carapace. The abdomen is like striped. Bright pink hairs. The reason that I've got my my sleeves over my hands like this is because it's a New World species, and New World species have urticating hairs on them, which can be super irritating and give you rashes. Thankfully, this species doesn't kick hairs, it just rubs them off on you. The ones that kick hairs, they leave like a cloud of these urticating hairs, and then you get in your fucking nose and your eyes, and it sucks. Once I know what the sex is, I'll probably give it a cool name, but don't know yet. Alright, you're probably sick and tired of this. Put you back in your little home. Come on. Go on, go on. Get in there. There you go. All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up everything that I wanted to do as far as the test stream goes. If you guys have any recommendations or like any feedback or anything like that, reach out to me. And yeah, until next time, this was kind of fun. I have to do a little bit more tweaking on the back end so it doesn't lock up as much, but overall, success. All right, that's it. Have a good one.